25th, 2021. And the approval of the agenda, late items. Hope you got those out. I hope everybody got them.
Yep, there was just 3 late items, just the presentation, and then a letter regarding the land use bylaw amendments and a letter regarding the EDI policy. Those will get added to the agenda tomorrow. Lorenda, are you there?
Have we lost the mayor?
Is it just me or did he disappear?
Where'd he go?
I'm not quite sure. What's a few technical difficulties after a long weekend? Maybe we'll just give him a minute to join.
Oh,
Otherwise, I believe Maureen, I believe you're the acting mayor.
I can give him a quick call.
Okay. Oh, I think, no, not him.
for those just joining us, we're just temporarily lost our mayor from the broadband. He's Wi-Fi dropped out or something, so stand by, please.
Councilor Nicholson, you are the acting mayor if you want to go ahead, but we can wait. I'm sure he'll be back any minute.
Let's give him a minute and
Okay.
otherwise we'll carry on.
That happened to us the other day, and Alan was on a meeting, and he was all of a sudden, he was the host too, but the meeting carried on without him. So that was good. So he just had to log back in.
Microphones.
Now, Liam, your daughter's not watching a big movie or something and taking up all the bandwidth for down here, is she?
Mhm.
Let's proceed with the approval of the agenda. And when Gary returns, he can take the chair again. So Hope, late items for the agenda.
Yep, it was just the 3 items circulated earlier today, the Bowen Island Conservancy presentation and a letter regarding the EDI policy and a letter regarding the LEB amendments, and those will be added to the agenda tomorrow.
Okay, thank you for repeating that. So with that, can I call for a motion to approve the agenda?
Sure, I'll move that.
Second.
Second, then Allison, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Right, thank you. And next on the agenda is public comments. Hope, could you tell us how many folks we have speaking in public comments today?
We have 7.
Am I back in there?
Hi, Gary. Yeah, you're back.
Yes,
Okay. Sorry about that, everybody.
we're just
We're at
starting
public
with
comments.
Oh, you're down to public comments?
Yeah.
Okay, is anybody taking that on? I will just reiterate that I think we're going to try to hold everybody to 2 minutes. And Hope is going to be the bad person and let you know after your 2 minutes is up. So we got 7 people that'll pretty much take up our time. So Hope, who have we got? Are we already in?
Yeah, we're going to start with Gillian Darling regarding the
All right,
Ecclestone
Gillian.
variance.
Good evening.
Welcome and thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. In the ongoing matter regarding Ecclestone Public Beach, the request of the owners of 1160 for a variance to the land use bylaw, I'd like to respond to assertions made by the owners and also update council on public access to the beach via the right of way. In his May 7th, 2021 letter to council, Mr. Clout claimed that the variance would address the unique hardship of his property. What he was referring to is the fact that our land use bylaw has specific protection for public beaches and public access to the foreshore because our community places a high value on these public assets and always has. In practice, the land use bylaws allow docks on most but not all waterfront properties. Having a dock is a right and not having one is not a hardship. There are many properties on Bowen with docks, and no doubt some properties where new docks could be built, and Mr. Clout is free to purchase one of them. The figures I'm going to reference are all in the public record at BC Assessment, at the Muni, and Bowen Island Real Estate Guide. In October 2018, Mr. Clark and his family purchased 1160 as a recreational property and presumably as an investment for 2.15 million. In July 2020, 1160 was assessed at 2.173 million. This was the assessed value without a dock. In the past year, the benchmark price for Bowen Island real estate has increased by 45.6%. All property owners on Bowen will potentially benefit from these increases. However, private property owners should not be allowed to benefit financially by diminishing valuable community assets, in this instance, our public beach. With respect to the unique hardships of this multi-million-dollar property, nowhere does Mr. Clark or his lawyer reference the significant and unusual benefits that his property already enjoys as a result of encroachments on public land that include a 2-story, 650 square foot guest building garage, 520 feet of which is on public road right-of-way, a septic tank system, and about 20 meters of septic pipes running entirely across and under the road right-of-way, a private staircase, 21 feet of which is entirely built on road right-of-way, so 1160 can access their waterfront. An uncovenanted underwater.
Gillian, we're gonna have to ask you to please wrap up your comments.
Pardon?
Can you please wrap up
Pardon?
your comments?
Okay, well, okay, so I have referenced all of these special benefits, and Mr. Clark may not have been responsible for carrying out these encroachments, but he cannot deny his exclusive private benefit from his ongoing use of these public lands. There's a lot of other benefits, including, variances, et cetera, of which the neighborhood signed on. We were promised a statutory road right-of-way in exchange for our cooperation in 2018, and we didn't get that. Council didn't follow through, and the owners
Gillian?
reneged.
Thank you.
So, okay. And I just want to say one more thing, that regarding the public access, we'll shortly make available to you a peer-reviewed feasibility report for a public staircase from the road right-of-way to the foreshore that's being prepared by an engineering firm. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Gillian.
you. Next, we have Ricken Patel regarding the EDI policy.
Oh, great. Welcome, Ricken.
Hi, thank you for letting me speak, and really grateful to have the opportunity to talk to you tonight. I want to speak from love for everybody here. I have no desire to shame anyone. I've experienced racism my whole life and fought it my whole career. There's a lot I like about the policy. I wanted to ask whether it will embrace merit-based hiring and promotion or reject meritocracy as a barrier of white supremacy culture, whether it will support race-based hiring, promotion, and tasking, or refuse to discriminate on those grounds, whether it would, for example, allow staff meetings where speaking order was based on racial identity, as happened at a recent Bowen anti-racism training. My questions stem from an awareness that those 3 lovely words, diversity, inclusion, and equity, can encompass a very wide range of ideologies and approaches, and I'm not 100% sure what kind of approach this policy will take. I also want to offer some caution. No approach has monopoly on truth and wisdom, certainly not my own. But I worry about some anti-racist approaches that teach a false and bigoted view that all people of a certain skin color are racist or biased against another group, or that not just meritocracy, but many other universal concepts like objectivity are aspects of white and white supremacist culture. A lot of non-white people experience such views as deeply bigoted. Another such position is it's impossible to be racist against white people. That position is vigorously challenged, even by figures like Ibram Kendi, but was taught as fact by the anti-racism training we had on Bowen recently. And that had some valuable aspects, that training, but it also taught attendees that microaggressions are macroaggressions, that it's impact and not intent that matters, so it makes the accuser judge and jury, and crucially, that people who are said to commit such microaggressions are, I quote, abusers who must be punished. This approach can be a recipe for cancel culture. And so partly, and I think that's very dangerous and very damaging. Partly as a result of these kinds of dynamics, DE&I approaches can undermine the trust and health of teams and communities. And crucially, their diversity. An exhaustive study published in the I'm getting an echo from Allison, could be wrong.
That's our time, Ricken. If you just want to wrap up your comments, it'd be great.
Oh, okay. So yeah, 30 years of DE&I approaches in the United States have not increased diversity and have actually harmed and increased bias. If you put people on eggshells or in terror about microaggressions, surprise, surprise, it undermines that authentic human trust and communication and connection the delight in each other, the enchantment with each other that's essential for diverse workplaces and communities to flourish. So let's have the conversations, but let's have them wisely. I wish you wise choices in your next steps.
Thank you, Ricken. Those are good comments. Appreciate that.
Thank you. Next, we have Kendra Patton regarding the Westside Playscape.
Well, Kendra.
Hi, I just ditched the kids, thankfully. Thanks for seeing me again. I'm here representing the Bowen Island Playscapes group in support of the Westside Playscape project. Firstly, I'd like to really thank Bonnie and Gillian for their support and help with the project up until this point. We are very excited about the refined design and plan that we have worked together to create and how the community will benefit from this greatly. Sitting on Bowen's west side is a sparse, underutilized second play park. It is our goal to turn this into a new destination, allowing our children to safely explore nature and outdoor play. My daughters Jude and Maeve would like to remind you that Bowen Island has the highest number of children under 5 per capita in Canada, some 750 children. That is almost 20% of our community. One playground is simply not enough. Fully imagine this playscape will host a variety of community gatherings, not just for children, but for the whole community. A new destination for picnics and birthday parties, walking clubs, and coffee dates. This new and improved park will benefit the community for generations to come. After 9 months of work, we are excited to really get this project underway after your unanimous vote this evening. The community has already shown their support with almost $13,000 in pledges and 175 followers on our Facebook page. We are also happy to announce our partnership with the Bowen Island Montessori School. This partnership will allow us to offer tax receipts to our donors and to apply for larger grants. This partnership is key to the success of this project and shows the community stands behind this project. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you, Bonnie, for presenting on behalf of us and our collaboration.
Thank you, Kendra.
Thank you.
And next we have Richard Wiefelspuett regarding the land use bylaw amendments.
All right, Richard.
Hi. Yes, good evening. And I have also submitted my comments in writing, so I give you the 2-minute version now. And I will be speaking to the so-called housekeeping land use bylaw amendments. I had a chance to look at that, and I take exception to the use of the term housekeeping. Typically, housekeeping amendments means certain limited modifications without changing the meaning of the document. And instead, staff addresses a large number of diverse and unrelated issues in one single amendment bylaw. Proposed changes reach far beyond of what can be reasonably expected under the umbrella of housekeeping. Substantial changes in definitions, wording, and in metrics are suggested, many of which have far-reaching consequences. And all this without providing compelling rationale for such changes. Let's call it what it really is, an omnibus bill. Of course, that has another ring compared to housekeeping and would certainly raise the eyebrows of the public. The diversity of the planned alterations in Omnibus Bill 528 robs the public of a transparent and constructive process. The opportunity to identify negative consequences of Omnibus Bill 528 is lost. And Omnibus Bill 528 also deprives you, the elected representatives, from expressing differentiated views and from voting actually individually on each of the issues. Voting with a single yay or nay on a wide range of diverse issues is not good governance. Bowen Islanders deserve better. Tabling the Omnibus Bill 528 as housekeeping amendments is misleading and not helpful for meaningful dialogue and inclusive engagement with the public. So let's fix this. It's easy. Split the Omnibus Bill 528 to allow appropriate and individual consideration of the diverse topics and abandon and let go of the flawed housekeeping amendment process. Thank you very much and have a good council meeting.
Thank you, Richard.
Next, we have Jennifer Burns regarding the land use bylaw amendments.
Jennifer, welcome.
Thank you, and thank you, Mayor and councillors. So as it happens, I'm also speaking regarding agenda item 7.1, the housekeeping land use bylaw amendments. And I'm speaking from the perspective of someone who, to be honest, lacks experience in municipal affairs, but I'm very interested in environmental concerns, economic and social, so the triple bottom line. And so for me, looking at this is a really large update, and it's difficult for a reasonable person to separate out what's actually changing and what the impact might be. So in the interest of procedure and fair process, I'm asking council to have these amendments broken down into smaller thematic packages with the changes blacklined in the document and brought forward for hearing separately to allow the community to properly understand the changes and the impact of those changes. For information, I did note that the planner's memo prepared for the meeting of the Committee of the Whole on October 13th, 2020, did indicate a track changes version exists and was attached as Appendix 3, but doesn't appear to have been posted. So I did spend about 2 hours actually searching the website and looking for it, and I couldn't find it, but I admit I'm not as familiar as perhaps others are with the website. So to give you an example of the challenge that I had, the simple removal of office from the definition of section 4.32.2.1, it actually seems like a simple change, but it must have been there for some purpose in the first place. And why remove it now? And what impact might that be to somebody relying on that definition? And these types of questions must be posed for each amendment. And I can't imagine what amount of time would be required at a public hearing to go through each and every one and to explain it, and then to have people feel comfortable with it. So really asking from a process standpoint to really break it down into individual pieces so we in the community can really understand what's being changed. And I'd also just recommend thinking about how we communicate about these changes. We've seen in the past that the newspaper and the website might not be sufficient. So just a thought for staff to think about broader communication of big changes. So thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Next, we have Lorinda Strang regarding the Westside Playscape.
All right. Lorinda. There she is. Hi, Lorinda.
Hi, Gary.
Welcome.
Hi, everyone. Well, I'll be quick, and this is, I think, a happy topic. I've written in my comments, and I'll just read them so it's fast. I raised 3 children on Bowen, and I'm now a grandmother to 3 boys under 2 living on the island. And while raising my kids, I held volunteer leadership roles with Family Plays, Beaver, Sparks, the Teen Center, and BowFest. I've witnessed many attempts to create more unstructured, outdoor, free spaces for kids to play and parents to gather and connect. This playground project will support our community's physical and mental health. And for that, I pledged $500 to the Westside Playscape project. And I want to say, let's get this done in 2021. That's all I have to say. And thank you for spearheading this.
All right. Thank you, Lorinda.
You're welcome.
And next is Andrea Harbut regarding the Westside Playscape.
Hello and good
Hey.
evening, council and
Welcome.
members. As a resident of the west side of Bowen Island, I am in favor of the Playscape project. And I've just written down a few point form notes here. 15 minutes less driving for all of us West Siders to get to an area where we can meet other parents and let our kids play. The current playground is on the school grounds. It's fabulous, but we don't really have access during the day, so it's evenings and weekends. Outdoor meeting space for parents and isolated, raising young kids can be very isolating. So having another place for parents to meet and connect while their children can be adventurous and get excited about being outside, I think is a really positive thing for our community. We'll be keeping more traffic out of the cove, which I think is good. And we can afford the extra visitors to our area. There's ample parking and we don't really have anything else that brings the people over to our side of the island, parents and kids. I think it's going to service quite a large part of our community and offer a mental health boost and a place for kids and families to connect. And thank you for hearing me.
Thank you very much, Amber. And that's it,
all.
Hope?
That's all.
All right. Well, thank you all. And we're going to move down to the consent agenda. Does anybody have anything that they'd like to pull out of the consent agenda for clarification and or edification? I'm not seeing anybody. I'm not hearing anybody yell at me, so I think that's we'll just move on. I would just like to say just before we do go on, the Housing Advisory Committee, that's a tremendous work plan. It's really well done. And the recommendation is the council approve the items as outlined in the May 25th, 2021 consent agenda. Move that.
Second.
Thank you, David, and all in favor, aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. It is approved. And we'll move down to delegations. Bob Turner and Neris Pool. Well,
yes. Hi, good evening, council. I'm Neris Pool. And I'd like to say good evening, not only to mayor and council, but to staff and any members of the public listening. Bob Turner and I will be speaking on behalf of the Bowen Island Conservancy this evening. First of all, I'd just like to introduce all the 10 board members who worked so hard and are working hard to make this happen. We have Owen Plowman as our chair, Leo Chan, Ellen Coburn, Allie Drake, Paula Hay, Louise Loic, John Rich, and Peter Williamson, and myself and Bob Turner, who are here tonight to speak. The whole board has been actively involved in deciding what our goals are for these lands and how to implement them. The Conservancy purchased 3 waterfront lots at Cape Roger Curtis on December 16th of last year. We are extremely grateful to our very generous donors who have enabled this purchase and have given such a wonderful opportunity to our island. The purpose of the delegation tonight is first to update council and the public on the status of these lands and our vision for these lands. Bob will be speaking to this. And secondly, to encourage you to pass the resolution that's at 10.1, recommendation from the Parks, Trails, and Greenways Committee. Bob will speak about our vision and our goals for this land. Over to Bob.
Hello, can you hear me?
hi, Bob, sure can.
Okay, great. Hello, council. Yeah, for my short part of the presentation, I'd like to introduce you to the lands, update you on where we are, what we're learning, and what we're planning to do. So as you probably know, the Conservancy lands sit on the south shore of Bowen within Cape Roger Curtis, pretty much halfway between the lighthouse and the eastern property boundary. Next slide, please, Hope. Yeah, so this is a satellite image of the property, and you can see the Cape Drive along the upper northest to the top, so at the north top end, and Huzzard Creek Lane intersection is right at the northeast corner of the property. We inherited as 3 properties, so 3 driveways, 3 building pads, 3 wells, and you'll note that the municipal Ocean Rocks trailhead runs right along the western boundary of the property for reference. So the satellite image also shows you that the property is largely forested, but with a broad open coastal bluff along the shore. Next slide, please. So we have really lovely second growth dry forests with some, beautiful individual old growth trees, but it really is the coastal bluffs on the property that are the extraordinary ecological feature. Now we knew this when we bought the property. 15 years ago, Terry Taylor, a very well-known lower mainland botanist, wrote an article that the south shore of Cape Roger Curtis was probably the richest coastal bluff habitat on the east coast of the Strait of Georgia. That's a quote. And he also identified that within those Cape Roger Curtis shores, that our coastal bluffs on our property are in fact the very best botanical hotspot of the bunch. So we knew from the beginning we had something very special. And so early this year, we commissioned Claudia Schaefer, a Bowen Island registered biologist and environmental expert, to conduct a full baseline environmental assessment of the lands. And Claudia, as you can see on the quote, confirms that earlier assessment. And just as an interesting note, one of the things she identified was a plant, Macoon's meadowfoam, which has been found nowhere else on the east side of the Strait of Georgia, but is on our lands. So it's just a reminder that, as she describes it, we have a living museum that is possibly, the best example of an extensive high quality coastal bluff in the lower mainland. So that's just reminds us of the responsibility that we have. So Next slide, please. Yeah, we have, this map is sort of a proposed trail system. Now currently, because we have the driveways and the building pads, we've asked the public to actually refrain coming from to the property, but knowing that that's sort of hard, we've asked people to stay on the driveways and building pads if they visit, or as we say now, travel on the gravel. In other words, all those places that are already disturbed, and please, please, please stay off the rest of the lands, because we're doing the vegetation analysis now. We don't know where the sensitive areas are particularly, and we really need time to sort that out. But with that time, and we're expecting to open up in spring of 2022, next year, we'll have a parking area you can see on Hazard Creek Drive, and a loop trail system that essentially will bring people through the forests into two really wonderful viewpoints along the shore, with a coastal trail in between. But all of that, this is conceptual. All of it's contingent on our ongoing baseline inventory, just figuring out where the sensitive spots are and where we need to keep people and not keep people. So just to conclude then with the last slide, we know we have something really precious, precious both aesthetically and ecologically. And our vision for these lands really is that these lands become a much loved legacy for Bowen Islanders, where we all can quietly experience and learn from the rich natural world around us. Really, in a sense, a coastal gallery of a wild, dry shore. That may have no equal on this side of the Strait of Georgia. Already, the ecological documentation of these lands may be the best on Bowen Island, and we're going to greatly improve on that. But we're very keen to share that knowledge. And we hope through that knowledge, be it through education, through research and monitoring, that we can, what we learn, we can use to inspire other landowners of the coastal bluff habitats and the dry forests of, southern Bowen Island, so that we all can better live on our lands and learn from them. So that in a nutshell is sort of a quick spin around the property and what we're up to and our vision for it. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Bob.
Thank you. I just want to go and
Go ahead, Nurse.
Thanks, Gary. I just wanted to basically address the recommendations that are before you at 10.1. Those are the Parks, Trails, and Greenways Committee recommendations. I'd like to thank staff who have been so helpful at various times to us. There's Bonnie Brokenshire has actually visited the lands with several of us. Steph Short has been helpful in getting us on the agenda and keeping us informed about the agenda of the Parks, Trails, and Greenways. And Daniel Martin has been helpful on the covenant. The two recommendations, one deals with parking at the Hazard Lane, which is where we are intending to create the main entrance. And we hope that you'll approve that recommendation, which is basically just assisting with extra parking in that area. And we see that being done in the next year prior to the official opening in the spring of 2022. The second recommendation is something that we'd like to see more in the near future. It's the Ocean Rocks Trailhead, where we are hopeful that signs can go up that basically indicate this is a municipal trail. You go down, you come back, there's no access to conservancy lands. And the reason for that is because at the very bottom of those two lots on the western edge, there's very sensitive areas in the coastal bluffs along there. And we're trying to discourage, for the time being, we're trying to discourage any walking on the coastal bluffs until we've figured out the trail design. So both those recommendations I encourage you to adopt. And finally, just a heads up about what to expect in July. We hope to be before you in July with a covenant application and a covenant. We have been working with Daniel Martin, who's been great in helping us with this. We're applying for a covenant from the municipality in order to ensure that these lands are protected in perpetuity. And we want to ensure no development and that these will remain protected, and no matter who owns them, they will be there for islanders to enjoy as a protected area or as a nature reserve, or we haven't even concluded what the name of the park is at this point. Park, conservancy lands, nature reserve, we're going back and forth on that. So thank you very much for this opportunity to introduce our goals and vision for these lands. And if there's any questions, Bob and I could be happy to answer.
All right. Does anybody, thank you very much for that. And I'd just say that it is a very unique and special property, and it's an amazing gift, not only to Bowen Island, but also all the residents of BC. It's quite a special property. Okay, so our hands, wait a minute here, I got to get my hands thing going on. I don't see no hands. If nobody has another comment, I'll just thank you. Oh, Sue Ellen, is that a clapping?
I'd just like to say congratulations to the Bowen Island Conservancy. Good things take time, and I'm just for the record, I'm officially part of the group that's putting together the management plan, but I don't think I've made one meeting outside of the very first walkabout, and I've provided a lot of documents. The meetings always overlap, and but I just wanted to let everybody know that for the record, and maybe I'll get to a meeting one day, but please let me know if you need any more documents, and all the best to you. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Sue Ellen. On that happy note, thank you again, everybody. Nice to see you, Owen, and best of luck. We'll certainly want to work together with you guys on this, so hopefully it'll work out.
Thank you, Council.
Bye for now. Okay, we're going to move on to the business arising from the minutes, equity, diversity, and inclusion policy, and that's going to go over to Liam Edwards, the Chief Administration Officer. Liam, over to you.
Thank you, Mayor. And hope I'm going to need to share my screen here. Go on here.
Are you able? Oh, there you go. Perfect. Just want to make sure.
There it goes. Okay.
Yeah, sorry, screens were not well organized at that moment. So, as you know, we've been working on this policy for a while, and pleased to bring it forward today. And I did want to acknowledge and thank, I think I'm pronouncing Ricken Patel's name correctly, and thank him for coming on today with some comments about it too. And I didn't get a chance to jot down all of his questions, but he had some good questions, and so I appreciated that. And I want to just say with certainty that regardless of this policy, meritocracy is a very important principle that I believe strongly in, and I know that Bowen Island Municipality does too, and that it's part of the hiring practices and much of the other work that we do around all of the departments. And so I look forward to continuing to advance those types of practices. But I'll carry on now with the presentation that we prepared. So EDI, otherwise equity, diversity, and inclusion, is best represented in a culture or community or organization when people embrace and encourage a diverse representation of multiple identities and strive to be inclusive of everyone's ideas and perspectives while advancing and supporting an equitable environment where everyone has fair treatment based on respect, dignity, equality of opportunity, and access to information and resources. When we combine inclusion, diversity, and equity, we really create a sense of belonging. And that's what we're really striving for here at the municipality. I think we can all imagine what it feels like to be part of an organization where you feel that sense of belonging, where you know you can trust your colleagues to respect your ideas and that your voice is heard and that you can feel safe in that environment. That's really what we're striving for here. We're lucky because that exists at Bowen Island Municipality already. And what we're trying to do here is to ensure that it continues to exist and that we can advance it further, and that we can ensure that those same types of values and principles are embedded in the work that we do every day to serve the residents of Bowen Island, so that it's considered in all of our bylaws, all of our policies, procedures, and protocols. So I just want to touch on equity in and of itself, because it's not the same as equality. And we think that this little diagram here shows it quite well. Equality is a great thing, but it's not always what's necessary or needed. In the top illustration here, it shows an equality situation where everyone gets equal access to the same thing. Equity speaks to the needs of an individual and tries to accommodate the needs of that individual. People need different things, and so that's what we're trying to look at and work towards here. A little background on the timeline of this process. It was last summer when this idea was brought to council, and council essentially embraced it. It was also around that time that we were seeing a lot of larger issues emerging around the globe. International Black Lives Matter movement highlighted racial injustices, including historic and ongoing violence against and oppression of people of color. The Me Too movement highlighted institutionalized sex abuses against women. And in a similar time, and even before then too, many Indigenous-led movements such as Idle No More have raised issues of ongoing Indigenous oppression and the need for reconciliation action. Local efforts by the community here on Bowen have begun what we hope will be an ongoing reconciliation engagement process with local Indigenous nations that will build a meaningful and lasting relationship with the community of Bowen Island, the municipality, and First Nations. Additionally, it's important to recognize that our own province was the first jurisdiction in Canada, if not North America, to enact legislation outside of the federal government that calls to take action on the rights of Indigenous peoples. And that's the Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act. So the EDI group spent a lot of time working since last summer when council made a resolution to develop a policy. And the policy statement and scope is relatively straightforward and simple. The policy statement is that equity, diversity, and inclusion are core values for BIM and are central to our work. Actively developing, supporting, and promoting these values builds a more resilient community. The scope of the policy, again, is fairly straightforward. It's really focused and limited to the organization in and of itself. And it's to guide internal operations and engagement with external stakeholders, and to apply an EDI lens to all the work that we do, and to effectively lead by example in the community. The policy objectives are to proactively identify and remove barriers that impede equitable access to opportunities, to commit to a workplace culture that is safe, respectful, and discourages assumptions about people's lived experiences, and instead openly encourages dialogue and support and empathy. To embed the values of EDI in the policies and actions of Bowen Island Municipality, and to explicitly integrate them into our strategic planning documents. In the policy, you'll note that there's several acknowledgement statements. I won't read the statements here point by point, but it's important that we make these acknowledgements to ensure that the policy has some deeper meaning. We changed the title of this wheel from what was called BIM's Wheel of Power to conceptualizing power and privilege. Because it's not necessarily BIMs, it's not something that the municipality owns, so to speak. The idea with this graphic is to show that in the predominantly dominant culture of Canada and British Columbia, and even here on Bowen, that there's been certain dynamics and structures that have been set up in our culture, and that in certain aspects of our culture and our communities, we find individuals and groups closer to power. And the idea with this wheel is to just help inform our staff of what these structures look like, and to be aware of that, and to recognize that there are certain individuals or groups that may have access to more power than others. It's not to say that this is a good thing or that this is a bad thing. It's not to say that power is a bad thing. It's only to sort of help people identify where or how people might have access to power or limited access to that power. And to try to, the whole idea is really to try to look at how can we deconstruct this and make it more equitable. Guiding principles for the policy are to prioritize equity for all municipal functions, recognize diversity as a strength, communication is central to success. I think we all know that. That's key to anything we do. Engage staff and volunteers so that everyone can understand and participate. Transparency is a necessity. Again, that's critical to the work that we do here in local government. And recognize that there are many dimensions to equity. I want to touch very briefly on this local government example. And this is a fairly significant one with our neighbors over in West Vancouver. The local governments themselves can have a really direct impact on communities and issues of equity, diversity, and inclusion. Covenants in the British properties were a selling feature, promoting the exclusiveness of their neighborhood, stating that no person of the African or Asiatic race or African or Asiatic descent, except for servants of the occupier of the premise and residents, shall reside or be allowed to reside on the premise. In January 2020, West Vancouver Councillor Marcus Wong brought forward a motion to West Vancouver Council to work with the provincial government to try to formally remove the discriminatory land covenants across the entire district, and it passed unanimously. Councillor Wong's concerns go far beyond the removal of the covenant, though. He wants to ensure that the process of removal is conducted in an open and honest forum, that simple, quiet removal is not enough. And essentially, the sentiment is that if you just quietly erase that wrong in the history and sweeping it under the rug does effectively similar damage to the intent or to the action in the first place. And I don't want to single out West Vancouver here. This is not the only community that had such covenants in place. And I think we all know that these covenants have no real effect in terms of the practicality of enforcing them, but they have an effect of just their being there and in place. So how do we move from these words to action? It's not enough to have a guiding policy. We actually need clear, tangible actions to make this a reality. And that's a critical piece here. The policy is just a guidance document. The action really needs to come on the ground, day to day, department by department, staff by staff. And so the policy itself calls for an action plan to be developed by the EDI Working Group, and that action plan would be approved by the CAO. The primary work of the group is twofold: to identify and remove barriers, and to establish protocols and educational support tools to uphold and improve EDI throughout the entire organization. Initial work will look at policies that might include the personnel policy or even the procurement policy and other policies to see where improvements can be made. The EDI Working Group, currently the group that built the policy, the members were Catalina Stevens from the Recreation Community Services Department, Janet Estevia from administration, Jennifer Pierce from planning, Rachel Price Jones from Public Works, Steph Short, administration, and myself also from administration. The goal for the terms of the group is to try to get as much representation across the departments as possible. We did pretty good. I mean, a fairly small organization, but we got some pretty good representation across the departments. We'll set term lengths, about 2 years for being a part of the working group. And the deliverables, again, as I mentioned, as an annual work plan and the development of an EDI toolkit, which I'll touch on very briefly in a moment. The toolkit is really just that. It'll be a place where staff can go to access best practices, other resources and documents to help navigate through challenges they might come across on these issues. They could look to it for places where they can go to for courses and for other tools. One tool that we want to implement, and is an easy one, is to ensure that all policies and bylaws and that come forward have had an EDI lens approach, look at it in a similar way that we look at an environmental impact for any of the projects that are coming forward. And so that we can just be added to the template. In the lens, we want to make sure that people are considering who benefits from a project or a policy, who might be excluded from those benefits, how might some groups be unfairly burdened today or in the future, how might privilege and power be entrenched in those projects or policies, how important decisions have been made, have important decisions been made with the direct input of those who will be most affected. From those perspectives, we are evaluating the success of our project or policy. I want to touch briefly on the financial implications. The costs of implementing this policy are very limited. It's really staff time to develop and improve policies, to review procedures and bylaws and the like. And then it'll also be training for staff, yourselves and volunteers and others that we think would benefit from such training. The benefits of implementing a policy are quite great though. The EDI policy in and of itself is only one aspect that will be necessary to ensure we've got the proper work culture that we want here at BIM. But with an EDI policy, we can help to reduce staff turnover. We can help to increase employee engagement, and we can help ensure that our decisions that are made are stronger and better with that have a more diverse lens brought to it. Under one study, there was a look at 8 different performance metrics of organizations that embedded EDI policies and procedures into their workplace. And if you only come at it from the very marginal tokenistic level at the beginning with just developing a simple policy statement, you're going to see some benefit, but very little, and perhaps even none at all. It's when you move to the next level of listening and response, so listening to your staff, listening to your clients, listening to, in our case, the public, and actually taking action on that it starts to see real benefits. And when you then embed that in your strategic focus and commitment, and taking it even further into accountability and outcomes, that's when you start to see the real benefits of the policy. And we start to see it across all those 8 performance metrics. Throughout the entire development of the policy, there's been ample opportunity for feedback internally in the organization. Because it's an internal policy, we weren't sharing it externally for external feedback. In October 2020, we had an all staff forum where we presented on the project. And in February, the draft policy was shared around to the management team for feedback. Later in February, at an all staff forum, we shared the policy and had real-time feedback, as well as multiple different strategies and venues for feedback. It was important for us to ensure that there's always a anonymous feedback opportunity for staff to provide us good, honest feedback. So we've ensured that there's 2 methods of anonymous feedbacks open and accessible to all staff at all times, any day of the year. And then we've tried to work in as much of that feedback into the policy that's being presented to you tonight. And so I'll open it up now for any questions or comments. But the recommendation is that council adopt the equity, diversity, and inclusion policy.
All right, thank you very much, Liam. You know, we've had a short discussion on this already. It's very personal, subjective sort of policy. There's no question about that. And to try to put it into a really hardcore policy is difficult at the best of times. And I think we have to realize that this is a living document as always, and it'll be reviewed constantly. So I'm going to go to Maureen first.
Thank you, Miranda, and thank you for the presentation, Liam. I'm glad that you have the time on the agenda to present the full presentation on this policy. I'll be voting in support of it. I appreciate some of the revisions that were made from the initial presentation, the reframing of the wheel, and also the revision to the definition of power, so that it was not solely in terms of the exercise of power by individuals, but also individuals and groups, having that be made explicit. I am curious to see over time how the explicitly integrate EDI policy into our strategic planning documents. I'm really curious to see how that evolves. To some extent, it's there in some areas of, say, the island plan, but bringing a specific EDI lens onto such things as the island plan, I think, could lead to some interesting and good and inclusive outcomes. I frankly can't understand why anyone would vote against the adoption of a policy of this sort. I'm sure that there are elements of it where we could reword something or sharpen something up, but as a policy that is the first of its type out the gate for the municipality, I think it's really outstanding. And I appreciate that it was something that when it was a year or so ago, when the conversation began, that you picked up on this as something that was very important for the municipality, that you worked with a team of staff, and that you produced a collaborative document that staff had supported all the way along. So I'd like to congratulate you, and I'd like to move the recommendation and call for a second.
Okay.
Go ahead and move it.
There. Sue Ellen?
If she moved it, I'll second
Yeah.
it. Should one of us
Okay,
move
thank
it?
you.
That council adopt the equity, diversity and inclusion policy number 2101 as included in the May 25th, 2021 regular council agenda. I'm seconding
Okay.
that motion.
Okay, thank you, Sue Ellen. And further discussion, back to you, Sue Ellen.
Sure. Just Maureen said most of the things I wanted to say. I appreciate the effort that staff have put into this. I think the engagement of the team is how you build a more inclusive and more resilient team. I think we've seen staff come through the COVID times and some of the other shocks and tumult of the past couple of years in good shape, or I think we're in good shape, but to have staff contribute to the creation or create a policy like this, I think is a really good sign, and it's very healthy for the future, reflects the OCP, and I think it's a good thing. I'll be voting in favor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sue Ellen. And Rob?
Yeah, thanks, Gary. And I have a bit of a diverse opinion on this, which is probably not a bad thing for equity, diversity, and inclusive policy. Councilor Nicholson said she can't believe anybody would vote against this. And when I first saw this policy, I had a lot of concerns about it, and I've spent a good, and I'm glad we just got delayed a bit so I could spend a bit more time sort of getting some background information on this, and I felt very uncomfortable with it. And one of the things that one of the experts said is, Rob, you and council should be uncomfortable with this. It is an uncomfortable topic, and it takes, Gary, you mentioned it's very complicated trying to get this down on a sheet of paper. So I hope I have a bit of time here to explain sort of my thinkings about it. And I'd be very curious to hear some other councillors' thoughts on this as well. And I do appreciate that we did have a meeting on this so that we could explore this a bit deeper, and the speaker as well. And I think we're all in agreement on where we want to get to. And I've been working in municipal services for 25 years. And it's very unique in the sense that it's not like you're selling baseball hats to kids or something. No, you're working with everybody in the community, from little kids to people that are just, at the end stage of their lives, people from all different cultures and races. And I think for us, from a practicality perspective in the municipality, we need to have staff that understand how to work with those populations and do a good job. And I think that's what our constituents, our voters, people that live on this island expect from us. And for that to happen, we need to have people that have very diverse opinions, very diverse backgrounds. So I am like 100% on board on where we're going. For me, the concern is much more the path to get there. So that's what this conversation is about. It's not about why don't, we should all agree on this. We do all agree on this, but is how do we get from here to there? And the EDI history, I had Rick Patel, who was on one of the speakers earlier. I had a great 2-hour lunch with him. I think he got in trouble from his wife for me keeping him too long. But he is a worldwide expert on anti-racism, and he's world renowned. He started Avaz, huge organization, very, very intelligent on this. And we had some really good spirited discussions on this. And he brought up the history of EDI policies in other organizations. And it's not a good thing. The history of the policy, not the idea, but the policies have been problematic. Very similar to in the 70s with a lot of the anti-drug policies. Good idea, well-intentioned people, horrendous policies that created a lot of damage. And I don't want to see that happen. Okay, so that's where I think, that's where my discussion to you is coming from. And I think part of the problem, sort of tracing back, where's the issue for me, is also how we started this as council. And we sort of, said to staff, go off, give us a policy that looks at equity, that looks at diversity, that looks at inclusion, that looks at anti-racism. I mean, that's a hell of a lot of things to throw at staff, almost anything short of solving world hunger. And that is a very, very tough, complicated subject. And the more you look into this, and there's people like Rick, who have been doing this for years and years, the more complicated it gets. And I think we need to really understand that complication and not to look at this as this is just a simple process. Let's get going on it. And I do, see some comfort in the fact that this is a living document, but I also think we need to start from a good platform. And that is my concern with this, that we're not starting off with a good platform. So a couple of areas sort of that concern me, that raise alarm bells for me, and likely the reason why I won't be supporting this moving forward at this stage. I think it needs more work. The one is the language around how we communicate EDI within our organization. And I had about 10 people go through the power wheel, or we changed the name now, conceptualize, power and privilege wheel, that one right there. And I've done this about 6 years ago, and I had 10 people go through this. And what was so interesting coming out of this was the interpretations around the wheel were all over the place. So, so people were not talking the same language. And that is a concern to me. If we are going to move forward on a successful EDI policy, we need to be having the same conversations. And people are having very, very different conversations. Just the idea of power. Some people thought that was a very negative thing. Some people, hey, power is great. And, I want powerful leaders, and powerful leaders lead good quality teams. So, but other people looked at it sort of like, somebody holding up the strings and controlling everybody. So I think that's something, and I think Liam clarified it a bit in his presentation, that power is not necessarily a bad thing, but it's interpreted very differently by people. And then we sort of look at what sort of constitutes power in our organization. And this is an organizational document. And a lot of things in here, race, wealth, gender, who you sleep with at night, your language, your age, for instance, very, dividing people into or characteristics into slices. And in my entire career working with people, it's way, way more complicated, and especially when you start overlayering all these different qualities on top of one another. That to me is not a good way of viewing EDI policy. So that was definitely an issue that I really, that I found not good. And I know council has heard me saying that I would like this power wheel or whatever, it's conceptualized power wheel removed. It's still in the policy. So that to me is concerning, because it's not a way that I think we should be looking at how we treat people within our organization. And then within the power wheel, we of course sort of, go from, like the race or let's say sexuality, if you're lesbian and that, you're way on the skirts. If you're gay, you're in the middle. If you're hetero, and that idea that these qualities bring us closer or further away from power. To me, a lot of them don't make sense, but I also think it's starting, one of the things we don't want to do is label characteristics as good or bad or moving away from power or not from power. And I think that's problematic. I had, an interesting coworker who viewed that whole thing as, and he said, Rob, you know what? Power is sort of where we want to be, and this document saying that because I'm Chinese, I'm further away from power. Wasn't happy about that. Another girl that I met who's from the Caribbean was upset at that as well, saying it frustrates me so much that people think that my experience from the Caribbean is the same as the experience from somebody with ancestries from Africa. Again, we're making a lot of assumptions here, and you can go through this entire area here. One that stood out for me is mobility, because I've basically never owned a car. And it puts me on, the most away from power. Well, for me, I got into politics promoting walking and cycling, and it's been amazing for me. It's saved me money. I'm mortgage free now. It's made me healthier. When I get to work, I'm bright, I'm going at it. So to me, it's always been a powerful thing, cycling. It's never been a negative thing. Here, it makes an assumption that that mobility choice of me takes me away from power. And then, of course, the question is, how do we convince somebody to give up their car and move towards walking when we're saying we're moving them away from the power center? So there are a lot of issues in this power wheel here that I think set us off in the wrong direction. And, when I look at very powerful people, and, I'll say it straight up, Liam, I think is one of the best leaders that I've seen so far. He's only been here a year, but I remember hiring him, and the things that I wanted to see was, a really good team leader, somebody that is a good communicator. Those are all somebody that, is trustworthy and that people like. Those are characteristics that powerful people have. People aren't going to follow people that they don't like or that they don't trust. And none of that is in here. It's all sort of race, sexuality, you know, and to me, it's like, we're missing a whole bunch of stuff here. And when you don't have that embedded in the document, I know we can't have everything in there, but when you start dividing people up into these characteristics, you start losing sight of some things. And Rick did point out some warnings, and I was actually involved in, I sat through the Bowen Island Anti-Racism Workshop, and it was painful, and it really created a lot of division within the school community. And we cannot have, we're doing so well right now within our municipality that we need to be very, very cautious of how we're moving forward. So some things that I would like to see within a document like this is, one is the importance of creating a very safe environment to have conversations. And I'm, you know, quite nervous because, you know, this is a very touchy subject and it's public and all this kind of stuff, but that needs to be created within the municipality. And I don't see that in here right now. I see sort of a lot of divisiveness, and I can see people getting very defensive on this. And we've sort of already seen a bit of an example with that. We had a speaker 6 weeks ago who spoke on this topic. And one of the counselors mentioned, oh, there's something going on Facebook. And I went to Facebook, and there somebody took the YouTube clip from him speaking, put it on YouTube, and sort of put his name on there and started, you know, basically, you know, saying things that I didn't think were very right. So, you know, how do you create safe spaces? And, you know, Ricken brought up cancel culture. And I think that's something that's really been happening a lot in the last about 1 to 2 years. And that is definitely a concern of mine. And I think that the need to create that safe space, and I know Liam, of course, wants to do this as well, but I don't see I don't see that here right now in the document. The other thing is, you know, is viewing people that are unique in our organization. And one of the experts I spoke with said, Rob, people need to get excited about one another. So when somebody new comes into an organization, let's say a refugee from, I don't know, Slovenia or something like that, it is not, I don't want to look at people in the sense that, oh, they got these challenges, they're a refugee, they don't speak English. As an organization, and it should be, wow, what an amazing background experience. We're going to capitalize on that experience within our organization so that we can make really good, solid decisions that represent everybody in our community. So that's a huge asset. And I think that's the spirit of what we're trying to do here. But in the document, it sort of starts looking right away, especially the power wheel, oh, they're disadvantaged here and they have this as a challenge and we need to give them this support for that. And to me, it's the wrong lens to look at these issues. We really need to, this needs to be something, and I've said it before in our meeting, this needs to be something that we celebrate, and we really need to look at this from the perspective of everybody's pulling together in one direction, and we need all the unique attributes of everybody to be recognized but used. And within our organization, we need to make sure that we're giving our staff the proper tools so that they can fully utilize their potential, so that we can meet the needs of the community. And creating that, and Leah mentioned that, but that sense of belonging to one team that's pulling in the same direction. And for me, when I look through this and I see, you know, and there's a lot of, you know, Black Lives Matter and Me Too and, you know, reconciliation and all this, I'm looking at this much more practically from how do we get an effective team together that we're fully using all the resources, they're working as unison to provide the best possible services for our residents and also all our residents. So, you know, when we say things like, you know, in this document, it says lived experience and firsthand accounts and impressions of living as a member of a minority or oppressed group, you know, I want to hear the lived experience of everybody. I don't want to exclude certain people's lived experience and only focus on one. We need to be looking at this way more holistically and making sure that we're looking at our entire community. And this is obviously when I'm talking our community, I'm talking within, this is an internal BIM document, not a broader document, but we need to look within our entire workforce and not just certain people that we deem are disadvantaged. We all need to look at everybody together, and we need to celebrate that, and we need to make sure that we're excited about differences within our organizational structure. And I see a lot of divisive language in here, and a lot of you have this advantage, you don't, therefore you need this, and you don't get that. And that concerns me. And so, you know, I'm sure, you know, I'm sure this is going to go through, and I hope, you know, staff, and I don't want, and I want to show a lot of appreciation to staff because I know how much work they've put into this. I think council has given them a job that is way beyond realistic to do. I don't know how I would put this together. I think we probably should have had a bit more outside consultation help with this. This is a big project. You know, when we build a sewage plant, we get experts to come in and let us know what to do and work with staff. And I don't think, and this is way more complicated. And there are some real pitfalls here that we could fall into. And I think, you know, hats off to staff for giving this a stab, for putting the work in. I as a council very much appreciate it, but I don't think this is a solid enough foundation for me to vote yes on, so that we move successfully forward and that we're not looking back 10 years going, whoops, we didn't see that coming, or whoops, we didn't see that coming. So I am unfortunately going to not support this motion. I definitely support the intent, and I'll continue to work, and I hope that changes will be made over the years. But I also hope that some of these warnings that some people are bringing forward, that we keep an eye on those, because I do think they will. There's a very high probability that they will creep in, and they have crept in to a lot of organizations across Canada, a lot of them, not just a couple of them, a lot of them. And that's the last thing we want to see happen within the municipality. Thank you.
Okay, Rob, you know, I said I'd give you time to talk on this. And like I said, it's very subjective, eh?
Yeah.
And I appreciate what you have to say, and I'm not going to cut you off here. A couple of things that the wheel is an example of what is wrong and what we have to fix. It's not positioning people in different places. It's an example of something that isn't equitable and has to be fixed, and that's quite clear. Maybe it's not as clear as it should be in there, but anyway, that's one aspect of it, and it is a living document, and it's horribly subjective, unfortunately. And I think we got to move on, if you don't mind, Rob.
Oh, I'm done talking.
No, it's all good. Okay, over to David.
All right.
Thank you, Gary. So I'm going to vote in favor of this. I've been in support of this all along, for the kind of the obvious reasons that others, and the, you know, the intent that Rob speaks about, that we need a municipal work environment that's absolutely positive, that's enriching for all, that leads to top performance on behalf of all the folks in our municipality. I really appreciated that early slide of Liam's that had the, you know, the belonging, where people are reaching their full potential. That's where we really need to focus. However, I am, you know, Rob, I'm really listening carefully to Rob because his sense of where we need to go is just, I think, the same as the sense of where I feel we need to go, where everyone feels we need to go. And so his cautions are, I take his cautions seriously. And I'm not going to go, I can't go through point by point. The point that you just raised about the power wheel or whatever our words for it now, I agree, Gary. It's not, I mean, I could talk about the power wheel. I don't think I need to. I think you covered it. What I'm hoping is that we are careful as we move forward, but that in our annual, and this is going to be a kind of a simple recommendation, and maybe it seems too silly and simple, but in the annual action plan and barrier removal and EDI training, that we focus on the positive rather than the negative, rather than looking for problems, thou shalt nots. Work on the positives, work on the thou thou shalt. So kind of to some of the words that Rob had of celebrating the unique perspectives that we all bring, because it is by recognizing those perspectives from everybody that you actually get to the best performance as a team. So if that's a possible, simple recommendation just to staff and to Liam, is that we focus to the extent that we can on the positive, rather than trying to kind of pull negatives out and get rid of them. It's easier to get rid of the negatives by focusing on the positives, by focusing on things that work. So I will be in support of this, but I'm very cognizant of the concerns that Mr. Patel and Rob raised. So thank you very much, Gary.
Okay, thank you, David. Okay, Allison?
You're muted.
David said a lot I was going to say. I'm in favor of having a policy, and this is a start. And yes, it's a living document, and it will most likely get amended several times before it and over its life. I'm just a question, because it sounds like there is a lot of confusion with the page that has the power wheel on it. What damage would be done to the document if that page was removed?
Very little. I think, I mean, to me, it's not so much, well, I mean, of course the details matter, but whether the wheel's in or the wheel's out, that doesn't matter, because the wheel is just a tool to illustrate historical and existing structures of how our culture has been set up. And so that's what we're wanting the staff to recognize, that these are structures that may exist, that we may be struggling with. And how do we ensure that we're allowing for those that are maybe not well represented to have a voice? And so if that was taken out of the policy, you know, that I don't think it would impact.
And you could still use it as a tool.
Yeah.
In your staff meetings and discussions. But it seems to be causing some people angst. And so I'm wondering if we should just remove that page. What does everybody think about that?
Okay, we have the motion on the table.
Well, I'll move to amend the policy by removing page, the page headed conceptualizing power and privilege.
Okay, as a friendly amendment.
No, I don't know. I think at this point I've made a motion
Maureen,
to amend the policy, but somebody needs
who moved
to
the
second
motion? Who moved the motion?
I moved
Okay,
it, and Sue Ellen
seconded, yeah.
I don't support removing that page. I think it actually clarifies for those who are reading the policy the various dimensions of power that can be considered. Taking it out removes an element of clarity from the policy. I think if you're interpreting it literally in terms of this is fixed elements, then you're misunderstanding the use of the graphic. So no, I don't accept it.
Okay, yeah. Okay. I mean, it's very clear in the paragraphs that this isn't what's you know, that it's there for as a tool and discussion point, not. But it seems to be being misunderstood by people. So that's why I thought, would there be, you know, would it damage the policy to take it out and therefore get rid of what seems to be a lot of angst for a lot of people?
I'm not sure it's a lot of angst for a lot of people.
Okay.
Nice it is for some.
No.
But I think that there is value in retaining it.
Okay.
Is that it, Allison?
Yeah, I mean, I'm in favor of the policy. There were some things I didn't like in the first one, and the wording's been greatly improved, so.
Okay, thank you.
And I guess the other thing I was going to say is one of the first objectives is workplace culture that's safe, respectful, and discourages something. So it's there right up front.
Yep. Agreed. Thank you. Okay, over to Michael. Thank you, Allison.
Yeah. Thank you, Gary. Well, since we had our committee of the whole on this subject, And we've only had really limited time to go through this. It's been discussed a lot amongst staff, but for us, we had the committee of the whole, and now we're being asked to approve it today. And I wish we weren't. I really wish we weren't. This is an extremely complex document which touches every part of our being. And yet, after a committee of the whole meeting, we're being asked to approve it. Just listening to the conversation over the last 30 minutes tells me that there are still many questions. And I don't know, other than satisfying an agenda requirement, or we've got it scheduled to be done, I don't know why we're forcing it through today. And I really, really wish we weren't. I've had a chance to discuss this process with other people, and I've been soundly warned of the unintended consequences, the lack of initial preparation, and the lack of expertise sometimes in which these policies came to life. I believe we listened to a gentleman today who unfortunately I haven't had a chance to meet before. And I would love to have listened to him talk for much longer. Why? Because he would bring incredible depth of knowledge and expertise to this subject. So I'm trying not to argue against, and please believe me, Liam, all the hard work done by people. But every resource that I've tried to get through to, have tried to open into discussions, have told me basically the same things. Is the document adequately prepared? Has there been sufficient input at all levels and understanding? Certainly we as councillors have just attended a presentation at a committee of the whole. This is really the second presentation, and we've had time in between. I'm really sad if we put such a meaningful document through in this period of time without more expert advice and help on the subject. My listening to the gentleman this afternoon, and I'm so grateful that he actually made an appearance, it just tells me how much help we need. So it's not that I don't support the concept. And having been, as a councillor, more than perhaps anyone in this room, working all over the world with many races, many countries, many peoples, I just don't think this is well prepared. So the reason I can't support it is not because of its principles. I think it should be delayed. I think it needs more thought. And I think it needs more expert input. And I think tonight's session with our speaker earlier on is a great example. So the wheel, no, that everyone will have a different interpretation. That will be a subject of discussion forever, and it will be a sore in the side. So no, sadly, I'm just regret that it was presented tonight. And whilst I understand the good principles behind it, I think this is a very shabby way to introduce this subject to this municipality. And I just don't think it's been sufficiently well thought out. So for that reason and that reason only, I certainly can't support it.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Anybody else? If not, we have the motion on the table. It has been seconded. I'll ask the question. All in favor? Aye. And opposed? Okay, Councillors Kale, yeah, and Winan. Thank you. The motion passes. All right. Just got to get my map back up here again. So the next thing is we're going to move on to bylaws, and the bylaw 7.1 proposed housekeeping land use bylaw amendments. And over to Daniel Martin, Manager of Planning and Development. It's all yours, Daniel.
Can't hear you.
No.
Did you join with audio?
You might have to try disconnecting and rejoining. Oh,
There you
we
go.
There we
Yeah,
go.
good.
Okay, now we're in
Thank
business.
you.
Now I'm going to share my screen and my presentation. Is that showing up okay?
Yep.
Yes, perfect.
Okay, great. So as the mayor said, I'm here today to present land use amendment bylaw number 528. So by way of refresher, this was given first reading by council at the December 14th, 2020 meeting. And at that time, council gave first reading and referred the bylaw to the Islands Trust, to the Advisory Planning Commission, and to a public open house. So I have today a presentation going over the results of those referrals, two staff amendments that are recommended to make changes to bylaw 528, and then in additional public comment we've received and some staff discussion on those comments. So the Islands Trust Executive Committee met January of 2021, and they advised that bylaw number 528 is not contrary to or at variance with the Islands Trust policy statement. It's not directly addressed in the report, but the Islands Trust Executive Committee made a following motion as well that recommend referral of this and all bylaws to the appropriate First Nations area. So I just flagged that as comment from the Executive Committee. The Advisory Planning Commission discussed this at their January 20th, 2021 meeting, and they supported the proposed housekeeping amendments to land use bylaw number 57, and they carried that motion. Next, staff held a virtual public open house in March of 2021. And the presentation given at that open house are attached to this report. And one member of the public attended the open house and asked some questions about the proposed changes. So next I was going to go through a couple of the proposed or a couple of the recommended amendments to the bylaw since you saw it for first reading. So the first is changes to our the way that we permit automobile repair as a home occupation. So the current land use bylaw, this point 10 says the following uses shall not be permitted as home occupations. This is in the home occupation section and will require the appropriate zoning or temporary use permit. So automobile repair is not permitted except that one motor vehicle licensed or not may be maintained on a property for purpose of repair, either as a hobby or as a home occupation, with such repairs to be completed within 1 year of occupancy of the site by the vehicle. I just note here at the bottom, the use, or at least the vehicle repair garage, a similar use is permitted in CD2 Artisan Square. And that use has a series of conditions of use that are attached to it. So for example, it requires an oil water separator to be installed as a condition of the use. So staff proposed two changes to this use. So one is moving those conditions of use from the comprehensive development zone to a general regulations heading so that any vehicle repair garage or automobile repair would have those same conditions. So the same requirement for the oil water separator that exists in the CD2 zone. And the second change is to amend the home occupation regulations to put a maximum duration on that limitation as well. So where it currently allows one motor vehicle and requires that they take place within the repairs take place within 1 year, but no maximum number of vehicles, that it would actually amend it to put in a maximum number of vehicles as well. And then I would just say existing uses currently operating would be permitted to continue as non-conforming uses, and this is governed by the Local Government Act. So uses could continue on their current site provided the use is not discontinued for a continuous period of 6 months. And then the next recommended amendment in bylaw 528 is just a simple change to the wetlands definition. So the land use bylaw has a definition for wetland, and in comparing it to the definition of the riparian areas protection regulation, you'll see a definition that is almost identical, but is slightly different. And so staff recommend just adopting the riparian areas protection regulation definition. The key difference being that the riparian areas has this under normal conditions could support plant species. So as of this morning, when I prepared the presentation, we had received 3 letters on the proposed bylaw. So one regarding deletion of the vineyard definition that's in bylaw 528, one regarding public comment periods on the bylaw, and the third about the automobile repair as a home occupation. So I just wanted to touch briefly on the vineyard definition comment, just to provide alternatives for council. So bylaw 528 deletes the vineyard definition, and the vineyard definition is about governing the growing of grapes or other fruits and berries for the production of wine from grapes or other fruit and berries at a winery on the lot or for commercial wholesale. So the way that staff have interpreted this is that this is about the growing of grapes, it's the growing of fruit or berries for the use of wine or for commercial wholesale. It's not about permitting a winery to take place. That would be a separate permitted use that would have to be on a site. So by deleting vineyard, it's not allowing that winery use to take place everywhere. But what I provided in the report is that if council wants to just remove that change to the bylaw in response to the public comment, I've provided a motion in the presentation and in the staff report. Similarly, council received a letter that's on the agenda from a comment related to the change to the home occupations regulations for automobile repair. And so removing the proposed change to put in that limit of one vehicle per calendar month, council could make a motion as well to delete that section in response to those public comments. And then the recommendation in the report is that council give second reading to the bylaw as amended and refer the bylaw to a public hearing.
All right. Thank you, Daniel. That's it. So
yeah, sorry, that's it.
Just for a little bit of clarity for me, the Kirsten Degner, House Sound Automotive. Am I reading it correctly that the rule that says you can only repair one car a month, they are grandfathered out of that or not?
Yes. So if council adopts the bylaw with these proposed changes, that they would be allowed to continue under their current intensity of use. So they would still be restricted to one car at a time on the site.
Yes.
But that would be the restriction.
Okay.
They couldn't relocate the business to a different site, and they couldn't discontinue the business.
All right. All right. Okay. Thank you for that. Sue Ellen.
So do I have my hand up?
Yes, you do.
Okay. Thank you. I have a couple of points. First off, I like that the wetland setback, well, the wetland definition matches now the provincial regulations, which is great. And so that definition is good. And I also checked in the text, and the wetland setback is 30 meters, like riparian. So that's terrific. I appreciate that from an earlier meeting, and question came up. I noted on page 21 of 22 in your report, because this is a housekeeping amendment, that the words Islands Trust Fund is still in there, but now it's the Islands Trust Conservancy. So I only found I just noticed that one, but you may want to check for other places where it's called the Islands Trust Fund, because now it's called the Islands Trust Conservancy. And I am concerned about the potential for pollution from some things like old cars being stored or vehicle repair. And I think that's why the oil water separator is required, or and I'm not sure what else is required for automotive repair in Artisan Square, maybe some drip containment, some kind of, I'm not sure what else is needed there, but I also, as somebody who's not a wealthy person and who's owned a bunch of Bowen beaters, I think they're called, vehicles that you wouldn't necessarily get all the way to town or have the money to tow all the way if it's an emergency. And anyway, I'm sympathetic to the need there. I wonder if this belongs in a housekeeping amendment. I think I'm in support of the oil water separator, but I'm in support of the same pollution abatement commitments or conditions that the Artisan Square one has condition, but I'm not sure about that 1 vehicle a month and whether that turns it away from being a home-based business, and whether that's the kind of change we want to make in a housekeeping amendments, or whether that's right for the community. Would the community have known that we were going to be talking about that under the definition of housekeeping? In the same regard, I'm concerned about taking out vineyard, and when I think growing fruit is a compatible use with Bowen Island. I can't remember what it says in the official community plan, but we have just approved a temporary use permit for a cidery, which is very similar to the winery, except that it's apples, not grapes. And I think you could make the case that they're the same. So I think I will be interested in what other members of council have to say, but I am interested in removing vineyard and the 1 vehicle per month out of this housekeeping amendment. So I would, I'll just find them quickly here, 5 of 6. I'll just move them one at a time and can see whether anybody wants to do this.
Maybe we should all have a chance to speak and then think about changing
Sure,
things.
that's great, because I do want to hear what other people have to say, and I'm sorry, I was trying to be efficient with time now that we're at this point. But that's my input about those. Thank you.
My next, Gary?
Councillor Kale is next.
Okay, a question, Daniel, for you. The letter submitted by Kirsten Degner. Can you just help me a little bit? I'm just trying to get a better handle on this. This bylaw would allow 1 vehicle per month. Is that? Can you just tell me just explain this to me, please?
Sure. So currently our land use bylaw limits doing automobile repair as a home occupation. Sorry, I'm just writing my right notes. And it allows, except it limits it to that it allows 1 motor vehicle at a time on the property to be worked on. And in talking to, as the report says, talking to councillors who put that exception in, the intent of that was for people to rebuild cars on their site, on their property, rather than to be used as a sort of automobile repair doing multiple vehicles in a day. And so the proposed change would put in a maximum number of vehicles that could be repaired over the month at 1. So 1 vehicle per month. The letter we received, the existing people operating as a home occupation would be allowed to continue at their current rate as an existing non-conforming use.
Okay, so they are, thank you, Daniel. So they are basically unaffected and they can continue business as normal.
They can continue on their current site unaffected. Yeah. Yes, they would not be able to relocate the business unless it went to somewhere that did allow the use.
No, thank you. And I appreciate that on their behalf, because frankly, introducing these rules, so many cars at a time, with the greatest of respect, who in the hell is going to monitor this? I mean, really, it seems awfully petty, but if we have resolved it for this particular individual with an established business, then so be it. I'm glad to hear it. And thank you for the clarification, Daniel.
Councillor Morse. Councillor Morse, you're next.
So I'll hit up the automobile one first. We obviously blew it in our choice of wording when we did the land use bylaw in 2002, because there was no intention when we did the land use bylaw to allow automobile repairs to be done, 10, 12 cars a day as a home occupation. The reason that got put in there was because there were several people on the island that were restoring old cars. And a couple of them were allowing their friends to do it at their place, and they were you know, they were a mechanic, so they were charging for their time. So that was the idea. You'd have one old MGB and you'd take it and it would take you 2 years to fix it. So you could have one car on the site. So we blew it with the wording in 2002. Now the other is the agriculture, the comment about removing the vineyard. The definition of agriculture as it stands now, and even with the vineyard exclusion, agriculture is the growing, rearing, producing, or harvesting of crops, plants, livestock, and other animals, and processing and sale of products. So you can grow grapes, you can grow apples, you can grow whatever. The vineyard one is just a specific designation that was done to accommodate what the Waldmans had.
Oh, okay.
The tourist commercial accommodation, it was all done as part of that. So by removing that exclusion from the definition of agriculture does not prevent anybody from growing apples and selling them, or growing grapes and selling them, or cherries or carrots or whatever. I guess my one that Daniel and I have been going back and forth on, and he didn't put in his PowerPoint, which I thought he was going to, is on page 22, it's section 3.9. And that is page 9 of 22 of the report. So if you scroll down to section 3.9, where am I, Daniel? I've got to find it now.
Sorry, Allison, I was trying to set it up.
Yeah. Oh, damn it.
That the setback exceptions?
Yeah, it's in setback exceptions. And it's 3.9 sub D, where it's D and E, and they're basically saying the same thing. And the building inspector, you require a building permit for anything that is 1.5 meters or higher. So what I think should happen is that 3.9D should be changed to read, retaining walls not exceeding a height of 1.5 meters may be sited on any portion of a lot, subject to setbacks to the sea, lakes, watercourses, wetlands, and highways. Because you don't want somebody building a great big retaining wall right at high water mark, and you don't want somebody building retaining walls right next to a watercourse or a wetlands. And people, so make everything the same for everybody, 1.5, and then just delete what has been put in for 3.9.
Is it? Sorry, Allison, if it's helpful, I can put on the screen just what's currently in bylaw 57 and then what's proposed to be the rule in bylaw 520.
So right now it's, you can do something that's 2.5 meters and you can do it anywhere.
Yeah.
And so there was no setbacks, and there's been several examples in the last couple of years of people building retaining walls basically right at the lot line, which happens to be high water mark, or right on the edge of a creek or things like that. And then you have to get a building permit if it's 1.5 meters. So why not make it 1.5 meters so everything matches? And 1.5 is higher than a lot of the municipalities have. So the bylaws that's written right now is the bottom part. And it just made no sense to me that if it wasn't exceeding a height of 2, it could go anywhere, but you had to do the setbacks. And then if it was a 1.5, then you didn't have to worry about setbacks and that kind of thing. So I would like to propose that that 3.28 be changed by striking out 2 and changing it to 1.5, and then deleting 3.29 in its entirety. So that was, and then the other question I had, which occurred to me, originally I had sort of said, why did we delete horticulture? And horticulture is the growing of it's part of, I mean, horticulture is clearly part of agriculture and the agricultural definition. But when we did the rezoning for the King Edward Bay Upper Lands, Arbutus Ridge, the cottage industry area, we specifically permitted horticulture. So, and that was plants and fruits and berries and things like that, vegetables and so in smaller lots that are maybe an acre and a half, and communities of those, maybe horticulture is a better use than agriculture, which includes raising of chickens and cows and pigs and all that other stuff. So I was wondering to change the, remove the removal of the definition of horticulture. Because right now horticulture is a permitted use in CD 18. And it was going to be changed to agriculture, which allows a much broader use. And when we did the rezoning, they specifically wanted horticulture. Everybody's very quiet.
Yeah, I don't know. Daniel, do you have any response to that?
I think just that, so we have the two definitions, we have agriculture and horticulture. And in almost all cases in the land use bylaw, they're always paired. So we allow agriculture and horticulture. And there's that one specific place in CD 18 area 2 that allows horticulture and not agriculture. And so for my sort of, when we looked at it, we thought, okay, that's not actually a large enough site. Like it's the small site that allows the cottage residential development governed by a housing agreement, and thought, okay, if they want to raise chickens on that site as well, that it wasn't a large enough deal to have a separate definition over the whole island and having this double definition across all the zones for this one location.
Yeah, that makes sense. Alice?
Well, it was just, we had done the specific rezoning for, and I don't know whether the applicants for the rezoning have twigged to the horticulture. And if
it wouldn't restrict them at all. It would only.
Well, it doesn't restrict them. It allows them to do a lot more. That's my concern. Is it appropriate there to allow them to clear cut and start raising pigs? Which is what it would do.
I mean, and that site is permitted domestic agriculture as well, which would also be the raising of animals for use of people on that site. So it would still permit people to keep chickens, just not to sell eggs.
But not in a large scale that you would be selling them to others. It's on for your own use. Yeah. I was just wanting to raise that one, and if they come along at the public hearing and raise the issue, then we are changing a use, and that means we have to hold a second public hearing.
Okay, well, I guess we'll see if they do that.
Okay. Yeah. So
Maureen?
I've got a motion to amend with respect to the setback 3.28. So whenever that's ready to go, I'll make that motion.
Why are they different heights?
Well, currently we allow 2.5 meters everywhere. And I think I was just worried about making too large a change. And so hence I reduced it to 2 meters within like the lot line setback, and then 1.5 meters for things that are the sort of the environmental setbacks. So the setback from
anywhere else,
the wetlands.
Well, it was 2 meters for the environmental stuff and 1.5 for anywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then it sort of doesn't make sense, because everything that's 2 meters and under, if it's near the setbacks, you've got to deal with it.
Well, I think he said,
and 3.9 is sort of contradictory to 3.2.
I think it said 2.5.
No, that's existing. That's existing.
So Allison, how it is in the proposed change, it would allow 1.5 meters anywhere.
Yeah.
And you could go to 2 meters, but you would have to still follow the setback to the seas, lakes, wetlands, water courses.
Okay, but I guess to me, 3.29 contradicts 3.28, and it's confusing. And the building permit, you require a building permit at 1.5. So why not just make it 1.5 and simple? And like West Van, I think it's 1 meter.
Yeah, I mean, that can happen. I think I was concerned about the change that people are used to building 2.5 meter retaining walls in the setbacks, and reducing it to 2 meters, I thought was already a change, and I was just hesitant on a larger change.
Is that a change of use?
No.
So if we change it to 1.5 and we don't get a lot of flack at the public hearing, then it's good and it's simple and it's clear and not confusing.
Yes.
Well, I don't have a problem with that. If you want to go to 1.5, that seems fine. Maureen?
Thank you. I'm conscious of the time here, so I'll try.
Yeah, thank you.
I'd like to pick up on a couple of points that were made in public comments, and then I have some comments of my own. The point that Richard W. made about the naming of the bylaw. The bylaw itself actually is not called a housekeeping land use bylaw amendment. It's simply a land use amendment. So could I encourage not using the term housekeeping when it goes to public hearing, in part because it suggests that the items being changed are not important. And some of these points may in fact be quite important for people. So the bylaw should be given the attention that any other land use bylaw should be given. And I'll also just note that in my understanding is that it's quite common to have bylaws of this sort that consolidate a whole bunch of changes. And in provincial law, for example, there are, I believe it's annually, miscellaneous statutes amendment regs that come into play. I've muddled up the terminology there, but I think the point was clear enough. So this is not an unusual procedure to the best of my knowledge. The second point that I'll mention has to do with the need when this goes to public hearing for a revision version to be available. I think people really need to see what is being changed and not have to go searching for the modifications. And I don't know, my next part of the suggestion, I'm not sure how easy this would be to do, but I know that, Daniel, you spend a lot of time thinking through all of these changes, and you have good reasons for all of the changes that you're proposing. It would be helpful to have revision struck, clean copy, and some sort of annotation providing a rationale for the changes that you're proposing. Then people aren't going to have to go toggling back and forth between a report and the bylaw itself. They actually can see them together. So from a communications perspective, I think that might be a useful procedural thing to do. Jennifer asked about the deletion of the office term. And I think my understanding was that what is allowed under an office gets covered off under general services, which we're retaining. Is that correct?
That's correct. So we had the two definitions for office and general services that again were paired and always allowed together, and we've combined them.
Yeah. So if she were aware of that explanation, I think that she would be satisfied that offices would still be allowed on Bowen Island, and we definitely need them. And then my final point has to do with the cluster of winery, vineyard, and horticulture. There's a theme going on.
It was a public meeting tonight, not a.
There's a theme going on there with winery, vineyard, and horticulture. And I think because there's beginning to be more attention locally paid to growing food, food security, and so on. This may not be the time to be deleting definitions that could potentially have some value down the road for people thinking, in that direction. So I would like not only for the retention of the definition of vineyard, but for us to have winery, vineyard, and horticulture kept. And they may not be used a lot. They may be repetitive in some contexts, but I think there's value at this point in keeping all three of them. So that's my feedback. And again, I really appreciate the work that you've done on this, Daniel. I know it has taken a lot of time. Oh no, there's one more thing. I think the situation that House Sound Automotive, is that what it's called? House Sound Automotive finds themselves in with operating their business as a home occupation just really points to the need for us to get moving on creating light industrial land that is going to be in use. We have the zoning on lot 1. There hasn't been anything more done other than the zoning. But this particular case really underscores the need for a potential option for this business if they're choosing down the road to expand or to sell. They need it, and probably others do as well. So that's me.
Okay, thanks, Maureen. David?
Thank you, Gary. Good points raised by both Maureen and Allison. I'm in support of this, and I want to congratulate Daniel for so much work. It's not like this is something brand new. The first report was nearly a year and a half ago. So there's been a whole lot of work. I've been sitting on the APC where this has been, chunks of this have been looked at over time, and there's been a lot of thought and a lot of time to try to figure out the best way to make these changes. So I'm in general support. I think Maureen's point about the communication approach to clarify what are the changes so people can see it easily side by side, I think that's really important for the public hearing. Allison's change on the retaining wall, I appreciate Daniel's concern about making the change too big, but to have a 1.5 meter retaining wall anywhere on your property seems a bit too much, and not have to even consider the the closeness to the ocean and so on. So I liked Allison's idea. It simplified it, and I would support that if other folks support that as well. Maureen's point about the vineyard, that is all a little bit confusing. Allison clarified it, I thought, by deleting it, it meant that it became just part of agriculture. And in other words, it's okay rather than not okay. But maybe Daniel could just clarify the bit about vineyards, to, the point that Maureen just raised, please. But otherwise, I'm in support of this. With the most important, I think, is the communication approach at the public hearing that Maureen described.
So David, Allison's correct in that. So our agriculture definition right now says, but it excludes vineyard, and then we have a specific vineyard definition that's about the growing of grapes for use in wine or for commercial wholesale. So it's excluded from other agriculture zone properties and only permitted on that one property that has a vineyard as a permitted use. So deleting the vineyard definition means that then other places zoned agriculture would be allowed to grow grapes for use for wine or for commercial.
Okay, to some Maureen's point then about having a specific definition for winery, vineyard, and horticulture, does that help us?
So we would continue through this bylaw, we would still have a winery definition that would be in the land use bylaw. So I'm not deleting the winery definition, it's just a tweak to the definition it refers to a winery as a winery facility, which is redundant and not helpful. So it's just removing that redundancy, but there would still be a winery definition in the land use bylaw.
Okay, thank you very much. That's it for me. Thank you, Gary.
Okay, thank you, David. And I'm just trying to capsulize what we're talking about here. And I'm thinking that everybody wants to move this ahead to the public hearing. And I think we'd like the track changes in for the public hearing. Daniel, if you can make that happen.
2 documents.
New documents, yes, with the track changes in
But
it.
a clean one and a track changes one. You need both.
Okay, boy. Oh, yeah. And the other thing is the 1.5 meters on.
So I would like to make a motion that we amend the bylaw.
Yeah.
We amend section 3.9 sub D to read retaining walls not exceeding a height of 1.5 meters may be sited on any portion of a lot subject to setbacks to the sea, lakes, watercourses, wetlands, and highways, and that section 3.9 E be deleted.
Okay. All right. And what was the other one, Maureen? Yeah, track changes were the big one there. And just leave everything the same.
Now, is somebody going to amend
Vineyard out of there?
second my amendment?
And take the vineyards out of there?
Sorry, I seconded Allison's amendment, but I did it with my mute on. So now I'm
Okay.
just my mute. With
So we should vote on that then, Gary.
Okay, well, let's vote on that. If there's no further discussion, that.
Can we have it on the screen, please?
Yeah.
It's been a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I understood.
Okay, it's the bottom. Yeah, there we go.
All right, everybody happy with that? Any further discussion on that then? Thank you. So I'll ask the question, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and opposed? Okay, I see nobody opposed. Thank you. So that part is in. The how about the public hearing? With a clean version and a track change version?
I can provide that. I had provided the track changes at the December meeting when I got first reading, and I will do that for the public hearing.
Okay, thank you. And we'll just leave it at that.
And Maureen's got a question, Gary.
Maureen, go ahead.
I'd like to make the second amendment that Daniel proposed in his report, which is, this is on page 5 of 6 of his report, that council directs staff to amend bylaw 528 to retain the definitions of vineyard and winery and any subsequent references.
Okay, I'll second that.
Were you going to include horticulture?
I'm not sure, is that actually being removed here?
It is removed in the bylaw.
I'd like to retain it as well.
A vineyard and horticulture.
Winery and horticulture.
Can you make that 2 separate amendments, please? Because I'm quite happy with the way it's done right now with vineyard.
Okay.
And the winery definition is already staying in there, so you don't need to have that. It's in there. It isn't being removed. It's being amended. Just changed around.
Can we ask this planner to speak to that?
I can confirm when I was doing my presentation today, I realized that was an error. There is an amendment to the winery definition in the bylaw. And
But it's still
in, and if it's helpful, I can show you the amendment, but it's removing just a reference to winery within the winery definition.
Facility?
Yeah, so winery means the production of wine at a winery facility, and I've cut winery in just a facility.
Okay. But you've retained the definition of winery.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, then what I'm going to ask is that council direct staff to amend to retain the definition of vineyard and any subsequent references.
Can we just actually make that motion to amend the bylaw? Because if we're going to do it now, then we can give it second reading.
Yeah, so just do the main
amendment.
Yeah.
Maureen, can you just give us the rationale again for that? Like, I'm a bit confused why you want to do that.
I don't think there's value in deleting a definition of vineyard.
Okay. Even if it simplifies things with having less classifications?
sometimes you need classifications in order to spur thought.
Anyway, I'm okay with that, and just to move this forward to the.
May I just check again? So we would be retaining the definition of vineyard. We would be accepting the revised definition of winery to delete the reference to a facility. And Allison's argument is that horticulture is already covered off in the definition of agriculture.
And so is a vineyard.
I'm still attached to vineyard.
Because right now the definition of agriculture goes on and then says except a vineyard.
Except
the current definition of agriculture as except a vineyard at the very end of it.
So it becomes, I'm with Allison here, it makes it a problem. It makes a vineyard a problem the way it is now.
Yeah.
Yeah. The only reason Allison said the only reason vineyard was in there is to look after that one situation.
It's only a permitted use in tourist commercial one, and it's not even being used as a vineyard now.
Right.
Okay.
And winery is still there, so it encourages people to. So I'm quite happy with the bylaw 528, the way it's drafted.
With the addition of the revision you proposed.
Yeah.
Okay, do you know where we're at here? Sorry to lay this on you.
We have one motion that's been proposed by Councilor
Correct.
Nicholson.
And we
That's
voted
not-
on that.
Yeah.
No, we didn't.
No, that that's passed. But the motion by Councilor Nicholson hasn't been seconded yet, so.
Hasn't been clearly stated yet.
Okay.
That too.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to question Maureen here. So Maureen, from my perspective, I want maximum flexibility around the future, agriculture and opportunities to try new ideas and develop new agricultural approaches on Bowen.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you want as well. Is that correct?
Yes.
So I think Allison's point allows that. That's how I understand it anyway.
Yeah.
I guess I'll go to Daniel. Daniel, what Maureen and I and Allison all want is we want agricultural opportunities to continue and not be narrowed. So by the deletion, does that get us where we want?
By my reading, yes. So currently we treat vineyards as like a subset that's excluded from the agriculture definition. Right. We have a vineyard definition that's printed in one lot. Without the definition and the exclusion, we would treat vineyards as an orchard or as a carrot crop.
Yeah.
Whereas the vineyard definition would have it treated separately.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which would mean a rezoning if you wanted to do it.
Yeah.
That satisfies my concern. I wanted to go with maximum flexibility. I thought that retaining the terms would allow that, but if that's not the case, then I support Daniel's recommendations.
Great. Thanks, Maureen. Thanks, Daniel.
Yeah. Thank
So
you.
can I move
Thank you, David.
Okay,
Yeah, go ahead.
hang on. Can I ask one more question then? I'm looking at the agriculture definition, and this is on page 1 of 22.
Yeah.
And at the very end of that definition, which sounds great, but it says excludes intensive agriculture.
It has all along.
And is intensive agriculture defined?
Yes. So intensive agriculture says for any of the following uses: commercial manure-based mushroom cultivation, aquaculture, the keeping of livestock in a pasture at densities higher than its carrying capacity, and adjacent confinement area. That's
So it's a
intensive.
feed lot or something like that.
Yeah, sorry, I just couldn't find it. Thank you, Daniel. That's great. Thank you. Then I'm fine.
So I would like to move that bylaw number 528, 2020, cited as Bowen Island Municipality Land Use Bylaw number 57, 2002, amendment bylaw number 528, 2020, be read a second time as amended.
I'll second that.
Thank you. And any further discussion?
Do you want them severed, Councillor Morris?
No, and I didn't know whether you wanted me to do them as separate. And that council refer bylaw number 528, 2020 to a public hearing.
Right, second.
Okay. Sue Ellen, any further discussion? Okay, I'll ask the question then. All in favor? Aye.
Right.
Wow, well done. Opposed? All right, thank you. Okay. Gonna move on to staff reports. Westside Playscape project, and I apologize for our tardiness here. Westside Playscape project. Bonnie Sharp, Manager of Environment Parks Planning. Bonnie, over to you.
Great, thank you, Mayor and Council. Just gonna start the presentation. Good evening. And yeah, thanks to the public comments as well. And I just want to say off the top, it's been really great working with the Westside Playscapes group and with Gillian as well on this proposal to council. So at January 11th, 2021, resolution was passed that directed staff to work with the Kates Hill Playground Committee, which it was referred to at that time, now referred to as the Bowen Island Playscapes Group. I'll just call them the Playscapes Group, to explore a collaborative project services agreement to develop a construct a playscape in a municipal park. Staff met with the Bowen Island Playscape Group to determine the best way forward, starting with site selection and scope. The Bowen Islands Parks Plan provided a guide for staff as it provides recommendations relevant to this project. For example, equitable distribution of park amenities throughout the island is a topic in the Parks Plan, as are preferred sites for playscapes and also park operation implications. The intent of staff was to ensure that the proposed playscape was sited or is sited in an area with adequate parking, on a bus route, and in a neighborhood that would not be substantially impacted by the playscape. The proposed playscape project, given the Parks Plan recommendations, staff and the Playscape Group determined that an expansion to the Westside Playscape was ideal. Staff and the Playscape Group agreed that starting with 3 apparatus at the Westside Playscape would be desirable. That's when Bowen scaled. Use of the playscape can be monitored over time, and expansion of amenities may be desirable in the future. The project location is on municipal parkland adjacent to the east side of Windjammer Road between the 700 and 800 blocks. The project scope, there would be some site preparation involved, and then the construction of 3 apparatus, tower slide, 2 swings, 2 small, 2 larger, a step and balance expansion to the existing log structure, which would allow a wider range of ages to enjoy the apparatus. This is a great graphic that was supplied by the Playscape Group, just showing the approximate location within the existing park of the 3 apparatus. It's a little bit small, but it was a good graphic. About the proponents, as I said, they've been, spent a lot of time on this project, very passionate young families, many hours spent towards forwarding this project. The Playscape Group researched options for play equipment and possible suppliers and provided information about 2 possible suppliers at the January 11th council meeting. And ultimately, they decided on a Canadian company, Kinsel. They are committed to fundraising $100K for the apparatus and costs associated with site preparation and installation. The Playscape Group has proactively talked with residents of the Arbutus Ridge subdivision to inform them of the proposed project. There are a few houses built in that subdivision now. It's growing. It's a growing subdivision. And the Playscape Group fundraising and timeline. Kinsel's quote for the tower slide swings and step balance expansion is $91,000 approximate dollars. The site preparation is estimated at about $5,000. And as of May 13th, 2021, the goal of the group was to raise 75% of the cost prior to signing the contract with Kinsel. And the fundraising campaign will officially start on July 1st, following council's endorsement. And to date, actually, the update tonight from Kendra was approximately $13,000 has been raised so far, with many pending commitments. The most up-to-date goal of the group is to sign the contract with Kinsale in the fall of 2021 or the winter of 2020 or 21-22, with construction taking place in the spring of 2022. There are some financial, staff resource, and maintenance considerations for council that, although BIM is not responsible for costs related to the purchase and construction of the 3 new apparatus, BIM will be responsible for ongoing maintenance, weekly inspections, and replacements costs of the Playscape apparatus. BIM will be responsible for capital costs associated with the replacement of the apparatus. And I spoke with our CFO, and with a 2% inflation rate, estimated replacement costs in 20 years would be approximately $134,000. About 1 hour per week will be needed to carry out an inspection of the Playscape equipment, and maintenance by the park staff will be required on an ongoing basis. So it's estimated that up to 60 hours of staff time per year will be required to address inspections and maintenance of the equipment. Operational costs are estimated between $2,000 and $4,000 per year. And the Parks Department operation and parks maintenance budget may need to be increased accordingly or reconfigured. Some components of the Kinsale equipment are under warranty, and BIM is aware of that warranty. BIM will be named on the warranty. I've confirmed that with Kinsale, so we will be able to tap into that for some of the components. Just an overarching staff comment that although feasible, the increased staff time allotment will be an additional duty for an already full parks operation workload. It's likely that as inspection policies for parks infrastructure and amenities are refined for new parks on the island, that corresponding Parks Department FTE increase will be required. So the recommendations before council this evening. Firstly, that council approve the Westside Playscape Collaborative Project Service Agreement with the Bowen Island Playscape Group as attached to the report from the Manager of Environment and Parks Planning dated May 7th, 2021 for the expansion of the Westside Playscape, and that the mayor and council, mayor and chief administrative officer execute the agreement on behalf of Bowen Island Municipality, and that council waive building permit fees associated with the construction of the Westside Playscape project. And that's my presentation.
Thank you very much, Bunny. And that's a really worthwhile project. And I must say that to raise $100,000 is quite a commitment. Let's see what people have to say here. I'm going to go to Rob first.
Yeah, thanks for that presentation, Bonnie. And it's exciting to see something happen up there so kids can stay locally in that area. And hopefully we can do a good job feeding trails into that so kids can get there by bikes and through the woods and whatnot. So it's great to see the parents sort of, when I first saw them come, I think they were a bit surprised at the amount of effort it goes into making something like a playground. And I know in school board, I've been involved with many of them. So it's exciting to see it get to the stage. I don't know if this is a better question for Raj. I don't know if Raj is on the line or if you can answer this. I'm just looking at just the ongoing budget implications for us on this, and specifically the replacement cost of $134,000 to replace it. And I guess we're committing to ongoing replacement from here on in. Where that money is going to be coming from and how we should be budgeting for that going down the road.
So essentially the money for the replacement cost would come in through an increase in the contribution to reserves that's required over time to replenish the reserves when it comes time for replacement. The increase in operating costs, annual operating costs that Bonnie had talked about, it would be an added pressure on the tax rate unless we were to identify savings somewhere, identify reductions in operating costs to fund that. So it's a item that would need to be at present. I believe Bonnie was envisioning that it would have a tax rate increase implication.
Just follow-up question back to Bonnie. Bonnie, what if we went ahead with this, the project and all that, but we did not make that commitment? Is that going to be an issue? Is that what are we looking at if we do that?
Well, we have to maintain, insurance-wise liability. Playgrounds have a sort of a different niche, and we need to have an inspection protocol in place. So that's staff time, right? That's staff time. It's doable, as I say, it's feasible. It's just organizing our limited time, staff resources to address that, because it's an important aspect of any playground. As far as maintenance, in the early years, I don't see a lot of maintenance needed. I mean, there are a lot of the parts that are under warranty, and there may be just little bits and pieces. So, I mean, I've estimated the 60 hours, but that might be later on. Definitely, we need to do the inspections, and I would recommend that be weekly. So, yeah.
And I'm more thinking about the replacement cost in 20 years, the 134. So what if we did not commit to that? What would be the issue there?
Well, I guess if you didn't commit to it, then possibly it would have to be removed in 20 years, or maybe there would be some more fundraising that could go on in 20 years. There's potentially maybe some options.
Yeah, because I'm just thinking that I think this is a fundraising initiative, and if this is a popular playground, I think it would make sense to have in 20 years a fundraising initiative. If we say we're going to cover the cost, there's going to be not much initiative to go fundraise the money. So I'm just thinking that that's maybe the better way to go, instead of making a commitment at this point for 20 years down the road where we have to start budgeting for that in reserves. So thanks, appreciate it.
I think that information with respect to replacement cost, Rob, that was information to council, and the whole point of that is receipt. There is no such thing as a free asset. There is a replacement cost at the end of life of an asset. So it's not an out-of-pocket expenditure, but we should be putting money into reserves to replace it at end of life. It's not good asset management practice to take on an asset and say we're going to replace it through fundraising at the end of its life. We should be planning for the replacement of that asset throughout its lifetime. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Liam, but I don't think council would want to go down the road of basically making asset decisions by saying we're not going to replace these assets at the end of life.
Yeah, I would echo your points there, Raj, and that it's a recognition that anytime we do take on any new asset, it's also a liability for the upkeep and maintenance and replacement. And so there's always the option too to say, well, we're going to decommission it, but that too has costs.
Okay. Thank you. Over to David.
Thank you, Gary. I support this. I think the reasons that Kendra, Lorinda, and Amber gave at the beginning of our meeting are the reasons that I support it. They explained that really well, and I really thank them for their work on this and the other members of their group. But I also thank Bonnie for pointing out the costs. It's important to understand. We can look at bright things, but it's nice to know, or we need to know, what the implications are from a cost perspective. But and I recognize that there's costs here. They're not huge, but public facilities are an important part of our community, just like we recognize that the turf field is an important part of our community, and we take on that cost, like the community center will be. Anyway, I support this, and I'm really happy to see the work that this group has done. So thank you, Gary.
Okay, thank you, David. Maureen.
Thank you, Gary. I also support this collaborative project, and I'm very grateful to the team that pulled this together and did a lot of research. I did have two questions. One was whether a donation of local lumber would help bring the costs down a little, and I don't know whether that's a possibility. I know that it was discussed in the planning for the first iteration of this project. So just bringing that up. And then the second point, and I guess this is for Raj, with the turf field, my understanding is that we've made a commitment to set aside funds to replace the turf field at end of life. Is that correct?
You're muted, Raj.
It is an asset that has an end of life replacement implication. I mean, we do have, we basically consider the replacement of the field as part of what our replacement cost of assets will be. So we do have a funding deficit, and that's why we apply the 2% asset increase in for an asset levy every year to bridge that gap or reduce that gap. So overall, I mean, basically we are committing to replacing our assets at the end of life, and that's why we have that increase in our tax rate every year of 2%. But we do overall, like, we don't measure, we have a gap, we don't have money for this asset, or we don't have money yet for that asset. We look at our assets in total replacement cost of our assets at end of life over an average 25-year period.
Okay, so it's not being done on a per project.
On a per, no, we're not looking at it on a per asset base. On a per asset basis, we combined.
So if we were to proceed with this particular project, replacement would be funded from the same source as the turf field?
It would be funded from, yes, the capital asset and renewal replacement fund.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Maureen. Allison?
I think this is a great project. I had a question about, and I'm sorry, I forgot about this. The existing Playscape that's there was a group, a Westside Playside group. Are they still active, or?
Not really active. However, I do believe that this group has consulted with the main spokesperson for the previous group.
So are we responsible for the maintenance and insurance of what's already there?
Yes, that was part
okay.
of the
So there's
collaborative.
nothing different between the two agreements. And the other thing, just to point out, there's nothing in the agreement that binds us to replace it at the end.
That's correct.
Yeah.
So for clarification, and even the section about inspection and ongoing maintenance, it says it's subject to budget approval. So, but if we're taking on an asset, then we should budget to replace it at some point. But if we couldn't afford to do it, we have not signed an agreement that says we're going to do it. And the school, for example, with their field renewals all the time, they always fundraise for that.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Yeah, the last development at Bix. Yeah.
All right.
So is anybody going to make the motion?
Well, Sue Ellen first, and then we'll go to the motion.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's a great project, and I applaud the people that we heard from, and I'm sure all earlier in the meeting, and I'm sure the other people who are also busy with little kids and trying to get a project like this off the ground. I think that's terrific. I do think, following up on Rob's point and the point that about donors, I think at some point we may, as a municipality, want to develop a fundraising strategy or some kind of donor recognition project or something like that. Here we've got a group who's going to find the donations and or that's their goal through this collaborative projects policy to build it. And eventually maybe somebody would want to make a donation back to Bowen And maybe replacing a playground would be great. And we don't have any policies around that kind of thing right now, but we can, as I understand it, write tax receipts. And maybe somebody could correct me about that. But we do take donations for through and with other groups for projects. And maybe that's something we could look at down the pike when it comes closer to the time of recommissioning or whatever, replacement. And however, but otherwise, if nobody else wants to say anything, I'm happy to make the motion. Shall I?
Just Bonnie, who gave us the estimate on the life cycle of this thing?
Yeah, that was all from the manufacturer. That's the
Kinsale.
approximate. Yeah, Kinsale.
Plus or minus, or how did they?
Yeah, but they
Because
know our
it
climate.
could
It
easily.
could last longer. It could last
Yeah,
longer.
certainly could. Yeah. But I think we also have to look at the asset management part of it. There's absolutely no question. I think it's good. It's an absolutely fantastic project. I think we need something on that side of the island, and the proponents are willing to spend $100,000. So I think we should help them out here, and it's going to become an asset for the municipality, and it's a recreation, obviously, facility that we should be maintaining for the population, the community. Anyway, sorry, Sue Ellen, go ahead.
Okay, then I would like to move that council approve the Westside Playscape Collaborative Project Services Agreement with the Bowen Island Playscape Group as attached to the report from the Manager of Environment and Parks Planning dated May 7th, 2021 for the expansion of the Westside Playscape, and that the Mayor and Corporate Officer execute an agreement on behalf of the agreement on behalf of the Bowen Island municipality, and that council waive building permit fees associated with the construction of the Westside Playscape project.
Okay.
Second.
Thank you. And any further discussion on that? Okay, I don't see any hands up, so I'm going to ask a question. All in favor? Aye. Okay, opposed? All right. That's terrific. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you to those lovely people that are going to give us a playscape.
Hi, Bonnie.
Okay, so we're going to move on to 8.2, which is Cove Bay Water Local Area Service Expansion, Grafton Lake Lands, Subdivision Phase 1. Patrick, Director of Engineering. Patrick, over to you. Sorry for the delay.
No, it's all right. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, good. Okay, well, we're we're at completion of the water treatment plant for the Cove Bay system. The intention has always been to add the first phase of the Grafton Lakes lands subdivision to the service area. The treatment plant building was designed to incorporate domestic supply and fire pump systems for that subdivision. And so the developers have submitted a petition to add the 21 new residential units that will be developed as part of this phase 1 development. So that includes 11 detached strata lots and 10 duplex units on a single lot. Those have been discussed as the affordable housing units. So that's what that's referring to. There's also 2 existing houses that are included in the application. One rental house just above the treatment plant site, and another property adjacent to this phase 1 subdivision on the Grafton Road side. So a total of 23 new residential units. The recommendation is that council direct staff to draft the amending bylaw for the Cove Bay Water Local Area Service to include that area, which is shown on the map. The individual lots that will encompass all of those units essentially aren't created yet. They'll be finalized as part of the final subdivision approval, and adding units to the Cove Bay Water Local Area Services, one of the major conditions of that subdivision. So the exact timing of the amending bylaw and the finalization of the subdivision is to be confirmed. In terms of the contributions, there's and I don't have the, just 1 second here. There's a contribution to the infrastructure itself, so the cost of the pump systems and the related infrastructure, underground piping, controls, electrical, and so on. That's $524,000, and then there's a $10,000 contribution per unit, which is, as some have pointed out, not consistent with the current policy that was adopted recently by council. It was put into the PLR agreement in 2018, so essentially a written agreement. And that's what that contribution is based on. Future PLRs and similar agreements would reference the policy as opposed to providing a hard number like that. So that's the gist of it. If there's any questions, I'm happy to address them.
All right. Thank you very much, Patrick. That's exciting news moving along there. So questions?
Yeah.
Excuse me. Sue Ellen?
Thank you. I don't really have a question. I thought it was nice and clear. I'm in favor, and I'll be voting for this unless somebody convinces me otherwise. And I just wanted to say I'm really glad to see the urban systems report, and down there at attachment 3, which, well, I guess my question is, it looks to me from the graph on page 1 of 6 and the urban systems report at the end, and then by the time I get down to the end, it looks like we could be looking at a 20 centimeter drop in each summer now, and then by 100 years from now or 70 years from now, it could be like a meter and 20 centimeters. Is that what I'm seeing from the?
David's saying no.
Well, I'm asking the manager.
So the biggest future demand scenario, you mean the gap between the biggest future demand scenario and the current demand?
Yeah, in terms of water level, in terms of meters at sea level, that measurement.
Yeah, so the gap is relatively small, right, between the the largest future demand scenario and existing, so about 25 centimeters. And then there's
I'm looking at.
I could show my screen if you wanted, but the variation, the fluctuation over that 100-year period, it's less than a meter. We're talking centimeters.
It says total decline of 0.2 meters by year. Oh, by year. Never mind. I got it. Thank you.
Okay.
I was reading it the wrong way. That's all.
Okay.
I was just glad to see the report. It shows we've got enough water, and that's partly why I'm in favor. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue Ellen. Okay, if is there any further discussion? I think we've got this first and seconded, didn't we?
No.
Okay.
I'll move it.
Okay, thanks, Stephen. And I'll second it. And I will ask the question, all in favor? Aye. Okay, that's great.
You don't want to read it out for the record? That's a pretty big one.
The recommendation is that council direct staff to draft an amendment bylaw for expansion of the Cove Bay Water Local Area Service boundary to add the Grafton Lakeland Subdivision Phase 1 area encompassing 2 existing residences, 21 proposed residential units and the new water treatment plant building. There we go. All right.
Thank you. And that passed unanimously, right? Was that what I heard?
Sorry?
Yeah. Thank you. Passed. Great.
Yeah, pass 100%. Okay, correspondence, we have none. Recommendations of committees, commissions. Okay, the recommendation from the Parks, Trails and Greenways Advisory Committee, meeting held April 27th, 2021. And who's taking that on? Sue Ellen?
I don't think I was at that part of that meeting.
Oh, no, that's right.
Bonnie, can you speak to this?
Sure, I can speak. So there's two recommendations from the Parks and Trails Committee, and both were touched upon in the delegation presentation this evening. So the first recommendation is whereas the Bowen Island Conservancy has purchased land to be designated as park at Key Project Curtis, and whereas the Conservancy has requested the Bowen Island Municipality provide support regarding access to and visitor parking, thereby be it resolved that council directs staff to enhance the roadside parking by implementing minor improvements to the shoulder and road at the end of Hazard Creek Lane near the main entrance to the park. Now, this would be a temporary measure until we could get something more substantial next year. It's about 4 or 5 spots. And what it would be is the superintendent of public works is on board with this because I met with him and road staff, and it would just be designating some spots for parking. Because that's where the Conservancy would like people to enter from, so as to not damage the sensitive ecosystems. The second recommendation is, I won't read the whereases, but it's that the Parks and Trails Committee is recommending that council direct staff to work with the Bowen Island Conservancy to develop and install signage aimed at protecting sensitive shoreline areas near the municipal Ocean Rocks Trail. And Carla and I are both on board with this and can produce some signage that would just show that the trail is just to the ocean and back, and point out the sensitive bluff ecosystem that the Conservancy is trying to protect. Yeah, so that the cost.
$2,300.
That was in 2022, looking at improving more substantial or making a more substantial parking area. But the cost of signage for parking would be approximately $200. I can't remember what I exactly said here, but it can be covered within the operational budget, as can the signage and staff time for the Ocean Rocks Trail signage to protect the sensitive ecosystems.
All right, Maureen. Thank you, Bonnie.
Can't hear you.
Thank you. I'll be voting in support of this. I would like to add in the amounts in the recommendation, just for the record, because this is a very modest request in terms of the total cash cost. I did have a question. I was wondering about the flow of this request. Can you remind me, did we refer a request from the Conservancy to Parks and Trails to think about this, or did this arise from Parks and Trails?
Yeah, the Conservancy actually approached staff, and at that time it was shortly after they acquired the lands, and they just had these ideas. So staff went out because I thought it was sort of the intent to sort of help this is a wonderful asset for Bowen Island. So staff did attend, walked the land with some Conservancy board members, and then asked them to present to the Parks and Trails Committee their requests for educational purposes. And that's how the recommendations were born.
Okay, thank you, Bonnie. So as I said, I'll vote in support.
Thank you, Michael.
Yeah, this seems to be a small and common sense type of amount. Can I just ask clarification, please? These pieces of lands, what is the property tax situation now at Conservancy? Are they paying regular property taxes? Can someone tell me what the situation is?
Daniel's gone, but maybe Liam, but we're working on a covenant because they they are subject to taxes, right? And it's
Oh.
quite a lot of taxes. So
Okay.
Liam might have more to shed on that.
Yeah, currently they would be applied property tax, but the covenant may provide opportunities for tax waivers. And if it's done through the island's trust, a covenant approach, that option exists, and it's something that can be explored with our municipality too.
But that's for the future, not for now, for this year.
So the current situation is they are paying property taxes.
Yeah.
That's right.
Okay, fine. I mean, I'm just asking this. Thank you for that. And yes, I can support this. Seems to be just a common sense proposal. And obviously we need to direct people where to park, where to go, where to do the least damage, and work with them closely. So yeah, I support that.
Thank you, Michael. Sue Ellen, is your hand up again, or?
I haven't spoken yet, except to say
Oh,
that I
sorry.
wasn't at that part of the meeting. And so I didn't want to present it because I wasn't, I'm totally in support. I just wasn't at that meeting. And I think it's great that this is coming forward. And I can maybe answer your question, Michael. I was at an Islands Trust Conservancy meeting today. And I think we also heard from Nearest and Bob at the beginning that they're going to be pursuing the idea of tax relief as if they were, as we do for churches or for some other organizations that provide community benefit. They're going to have the public coming on, so they'll be looking at a covenant with the municipality for that, is my current understanding. And but otherwise, I'd be happy to make the motions as Bonnie read them, so I moved them.
Okay.
And Maureen wanted to add a clause to the first one at a cost of up to $150, and for the second one at a cost of up to $300.
Sorry, I think
the costs were a little more.
So I've just added a clause at the end of the
No.
first one that.
Can we hear what Hope is adding?
Hope, go ahead, please.
Go ahead.
Just that further be it resolved that council directs staff to include a provision in the 2022 budget of approximately $2,000 for this work.
No, if you read on, it's talking about $150 this year.
In the staff comments, it talks about $2,000.
Yeah, that's, I'm sorry.
Bonnie's
Sorry,
got her
Hope.
hand up.
Yeah, so it's the signage installation would be about $300 this year. I just wanted to flag that in 2022, I might be coming back to council with an option to help the Conservancy expand the parking area at a cost of $2,000. I just wanted to bring that up at this point. But the signage, I've estimated at approximately $300 for the first project, and about for the signage for the Ocean Rocks Trail, and $150 for the parking signage.
So
That's plus staff time, or is that included?
It's included with that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And could I just suggest a revision there, Bonnie? And related to the first recommendation, it's an estimated cost of $450 for both items. So Hope, what I suggest, I'll just read. Nobody's read this recommendation yet, have they? No. Okay. So first recommendation.
Bonnie read them earlier, but go ahead.
She did? Okay. Then if you could just add in, therefore be it resolved that council directs staff at an estimated cost of $450 to enhance the roadside. And then in the second recommendation, to add in just at the very end at an estimated cost of $300.
So where do you get the $450 from, Maureen?
$150 from operating budget for enhancing the roadside parking, and $300 from the operating budget for installing the parking signage. That's what's in the report, Bonnie. Unless I'm misreading.
I'm just reading the comments from the manager of environment. That's what I was looking at.
I think the roadside parking is estimated to be $150, and then the signage for the Ocean Rocks Trail is $300. It's a $400 total for this year.
Okay, just as long as it's reflected and it's consistent with what was in Bonnie's report.
Yeah, because Bonnie's report says delineating the stalls with signage was determined to be feasible at a cost of approximately $150.
And then the signage for Ocean Rocks will be a bit more because the signage will have a map.
$300.
It will be $300.
Oh,
okay.
So the
So
total
450.
cost,
Okay.
450.
The reason I want it in there is I just want to be clear that it's a very modest cost to get this work done.
Yeah. All right, is everybody happy with the recommendations as they stand?
Just to confirm, it is 150 for the first motion and 300
Yes.
for the second.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to do them separately? Want to split them?
No.
Well, they are two separate motions, so I think we should deal with them separately, yes.
Okay. Then on the first motion, how have you added in the money on that?
Yes.
Cost
Third
of-
bullet.
Yeah.
Pardon me?
She's added a third bullet at a cost not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not to exceed 150 to be funded from the park's operating budget.
Yeah.
All right. And okay, so that's moved and seconded. I'll move that. Second to.
Second.
Thank you, David. Okay, all in favor, aye. Boy, we're starting to slow down a bit here. Second one, and you've added that $300 to the second one, Hope?
Yeah.
That's correct.
I move that. Second.
I'll second it again.
Okay, thanks, David. And all in favor? Aye. All right, okay. So we got through that one. Thank you.
I think that's the first motion we've had for $150.
Yeah, I know. It's pretty, seems to go down pretty easy, doesn't it? And
we're
we're
new business.
New business with Liam Edwards. Update. Thank you, Liam.
I'll try to keep it short,
Thank you.
recognizing time. I do want to
you.
provide a bit of an update on where we're at with UBCM these days.
Oh, good.
And so we had a presentation from UBCM staff at our recent Regional Administrators Advisory Committee, which is the CAO forum in the region. And they were presenting on 3 topics that they took to the Premier and MLAs and ministers last week for their advocacy days. And they were focused on how to support local governments in the delivery of UNDRIP, the United Nations Declarations of Rights of Indigenous Peoples, and the provincial legislation in support of that, which I spoke to earlier today. So looking at how to support local governments in bringing those calls to action to life. The other focus was around housing and the opioid crisis. And the third focus was around fiscal reform for local governments, which some of you may recall was brought up in 2013 through the Strong Fiscal Futures report that they did back then. And so it's been resurrected with a new working group. And on that particular item, that committee is going to be bringing forward a report for council or for UBCM executive endorsement this summer. Don't have a specific date. And that it'll be debated at convention. And so I think that should be an interesting piece of work looking at the local government finance options. Another piece of work I just wanted to bring to your attention too was just we collaborate across the region on how we're managing through the pandemic. And one issue that I raised with the committee was around vaccination policies for our organization and whether or not that's anything that anybody's been doing any work on. And it's just wanting to raise the awareness that it is a touchy subject because it's something that, you know, legally, we can't really require people to be vaccinated. And so it's a delicate balance between protecting the organization and its employees and protecting the rights of individuals' personal choices for their own public health. And so it'll be interesting to see how that continues to unfold along with our provincial restart plans that are unfolding now too. And I'll leave it at that for now.
Okay, thank you, Liam. And Metro Vancouver Director David Hawking, update to council on Metro Vancouver business.
Thank you, Gary. No report this week. We haven't had a meeting yet. We have got one this Friday.
Okay, thank you, David. And the next one is the Island Trust Municipal Trustees, Fass and Kale. Update to council on Island Trust business.
Sure, if you'd like me to go ahead, I'll just keep it very quick because we're after 9 o'clock.
Yes.
And so I'll just say you can look at 12.6A and B in the information items. All across the Islands Trust area, there's been a surge in development applications. So we're just letting people know that get your permit applications in soon to beat the rush and expect delays because there's just so many people as on Bowen. And this also is affecting the Islands Trust Conservancy in that as properties change hands and people make different financial plans, the Islands Trust Conservancy, the people who make nature reserves and conservation covenants are also getting a lot of questions and applications. And so I was going to talk more about this tonight, but we're running some of our opportunity fund, the fund that we use to help groups like the Bowen Island Conservancy, which we gave a $5,000 grant to earlier this year, so to help with surveying and things like that, to help the projects get going. That fund is going down. So if you're talking to somebody who wants to make a gift, no, I won't go into all that. But just to say, it's busy times all around at the Islands Trust, and including on the policy statement and all kinds of other projects. So just refer you to those two press releases. Trust Council comes up in June, and we've got a draft schedule already. And tomorrow I meet with the executive committee to finalize more parts of the agenda. That's it. Okay, thank you, Sue Ellen. Michael, any comments?
No, for brevity, defer for next meeting.
All right, thank you. Councillor Nicholson, update to council on Metro Vancouver Regional Parks Committee meetings.
Thank you, Gary. We met on the 12th of May, and the annual report for regional parks was presented. And if you're interested, I'd encourage you to go to the Metro Van website rather than my going into the details at the moment. The one thing I will mention is that we had a report from the Pacific Parklands Foundation, which is a foundation that supports the regional parks. And they recently held a fundraising drive, working with 15 production teams, film production teams. One of the things you might not know is that in regional parks, there's pretty much something being shot there, filmed there every day. So the production companies got together and they held what they called the Real Green Legacy Project, and they raised about $164,000 for 9 smallish projects throughout the park system. 7 of those projects are now fully funded. The other 2, they're continuing to fundraise. One of them is to enhance wetlands at Crippen Park. And I believe it's the area around the dog park and the bridge near the meadow. So stay tuned for news on when that funding gets completed and more details on what they're planning. That's my report.
All right, thank you, Maureen. And Councillor Allison Morse.
TransLink. Meeting's not till Thursday, so nothing to report there. But you should have seen the news release, which is item 12 7.15 at the bottom of the information items, the new chief executive officer has been appointed. His
Yeah.
name is Kevin Quinn, and he comes from the Maryland Transit System, the MTA, and he will start on July the 19th.
Awesome. Thanks, Allison. 11.6 is we're going to move to a closed meeting. And the recommendation is a council meeting immediately following the regular council meeting to discuss items pursuant to section 90-1A, G, I, J, and K of the community charter. I'll move that.
I'll second it.
Thank you. And all in favor? Anybody need a break or should we move right into this?
Hope needs a couple of minutes to
Okay.
turn this thing off and stuff, right? I'm just
Okay.